Croeso I bawb I gyfarfod Bwrdd Ymddiriedolaeth Gwasanaeth Iechyd Gwladol Prifysgol Velindre. Welcome all to Velindre University NHS Trust Board meeting. Fel aelod o'r cyhoedd, gallwch fynychu'r cyfarfod I arsylwi. Mae hynny'n golygu y gallwch weld a chlywed y cyfarfod, ond ni chewch gyfrannu. Rydym yn recordio'r cyfarfod a bydd cofnod ohono ar gael ar ein gwefan yn fuan. O ganlyniad, gofynnwn yn garedig I chi beidio a recordio'r cyfarfod os gwelwch yn dda. As a member of the public, you can attend the meeting as an observer. That means that you can see and hear the discussion, but cannot participate. We intend to provide a video recording of the meeting, which will be available on the website soon after. For that reason, we ask that you do not record the meeting yourself. Hoffwn gyflwyno aelodau annibynnol o'r bwrdd. I would like to introduce the independent members of the board. A'r prifweithredwr ac aelodau gweithredol ac anweithredol o'r bwrdd. And the board chief executive, executive and non-executive board members. Hoffwn gyflwyno nawr gadeirydd y bwrdd, yr athro Donna Mead OBE. I would now like to introduce the chair, Professor Donna Mead OBE.
Bore da pawb, a croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd I cyfarfod yma heddiw. Good morning everyone and a warm welcome to you all to this meeting today. As you've just heard, the meeting is being live streamed and will be available on the website very shortly so that colleagues, members of the public or even yourselves can look again at the meeting in your own time. It's a hybrid meeting. As usual, we've got some people joining us virtually and we are in the boardroom in headquarters. A number of us are here in person. So I've got Lauren at my side and I think Kyle is manning the IT side of things. So those joining us virtually, put your hands up in the normal way. And likewise, around the table, if you put your hands up, and we'll try and make sure that we pull everybody in the order that they raise their hands. But just bear with us. There's a lot to look at my screen, my papers around the room, but I'll do my very best, and I do not intend to leave anybody out. So if I do, that it's inadvertent. So calling a start to the meeting, if we can begin with apologies. We have apologies from Kath O'Brien and from David Cogan, our patient representative, and from Stephen Allen from Llais, but we have somebody from Llais who's observing us this morning. I'll introduce you shortly, Markham. So we've got a number of attendees this morning. Kate February you can see online from Audit Wales, who is always in attendance at this board meeting. Markham Nathan from Llais, welcome. This is your first meeting. Welcome to the Trust.
Thank you.
Welcome to this meeting. If although you're here as an observer, Markham, if there's any point you want to word, I'd be happy to take your point or your question. No problem. Tony Millen is joining us. That's later on in the agenda, as is Helen Payne and Tom Rackley, and they'll be joining us for lunch together with Kathy Aiken, Rachel Hennessy, Acting Director of Velindre Cancer Services. Congratulations on your appointment, Rachel. I think this is your first board meeting since you were successful in the interim appointment as Director of the Cancer Centre. So wishing you the very best in that role.
Thank you.
And we are all here to support you in that role. So use us to support you. Alan, and you're here from Welsh Blood Service. So 1.30. Are there any matters of interest pertinent to the items on today's agenda which need to be declared? No? Thank you. Colleagues, you remember I I wasn't present at the last board meeting. It's the only board meeting I've missed so far. I'm gutted that that happened, but I really was quite poorly. So Vice Chair Stephen Harries acted up in my absence. So if I could take us to 1.4 in the minutes, and if I could ask Stephen if you would take this item, please, because I understand there are a couple of matters of observation, correction, which colleagues want to make.
Thank you. Yes, say obviously I've agreed these as a draft,
Yeah.
and if there are any questions, comments.
Hilary and Gareth.
Hilary and Gareth.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Okay. So and I know Vicky has her hand up as well here. So shall I start with Gareth, please?
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Chair. My comments were first of all on page 12 of 18, and it's minute 8.6, which is the Welsh language annual report. And I think there's an important nuance in the first bullet point, which is recognition that the trust currently does not meet the standards. I think it should say all of the standards, because we do meet some of them, so that we need to correct that, please. I have fed through to Lauren some comments in relation to the paragraph at the head of the next page, which starts Gareth Jones advised of his recent attendance. And I've asked for that paragraph to be amended just to give a more accurate reflection of my report of the webinar with the Welsh Language Commissioner. I don't propose to go through those amendments unless you particularly want me to now, but I think they represent a more accurate representation. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. So just on both of those points, the first point, obviously important correction, nuance, that some to be added to the minutes, and would agree that. And then I also can see it now, the proposed amended paragraph here that you sent to Lauren. I'm very happy to agree that. I know colleagues on the room have seen it, but it is just a further clarification rather than addition. So personally, I'm very happy to accept that. Thank you, Gareth. So happy with that, Gareth. Can we move on to Hilary, please?
Thank you, Stephen. My comment was at the start, it doesn't show any online attendees. I joined the meeting online. It's not referred to anywhere, and I don't think I was the only one.
That is correct.
Yeah.
There were a number of attendees. We'll pick that up from the recording, Hilary, but obviously it's important we note both the members who were present online and the attendees who attended online as well. So we'll go back into the recording and correct that. Again, I presume board members will have no objection just to adding that as a matter of accuracy. Was there anything else, Hilary?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've got several hands. Vicky did have a hand up.
Yes, if I could just refer to page 9, at the bottom of page 9, where it's the annual reports. So where it states annual patient donor experience report, that first paragraph was actually just about the introduction to the annual reports per se. So if the title can go after that paragraph, but also what I found strange was the use of the word citing. So Vicky Morris noted that Nicola Williams had facilitated the citing of all annual reports. So what I was talking about was the coordination of all of the annual reports to the July committee, which is the first time they've all, in the majority, come to that committee. So that's what I was referring to. So I'm not quite sure where the word citing came in, but if that can be amended.
Okay, well, Lauren is smiling because I made exactly the same point, that we seem to have introduced the word citing in, and citing sometimes is used as seeing something, and sometimes misused as CIT, citing, as in to quote something. So I have suggested in future we don't use the word citing in minutes, because it doesn't actually immediately mean what I think it's meant to mean. So whether we're able to go back and perhaps tweak that, I'll have a look with Lauren. Thank you. I think Martin was next, and then after Martin will be Andrew. Thank you.
Just a small point of accuracy under 8.4, the very bottom of page 11. It says Hilary Williams, and I think we had this before, because I'm almost certain that's Hilary Jones.
I wondered that actually, but we do have a Hilary Williams in the trust, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Can we go back and check? Yeah, we'll assume that to be, thank you, Martin, for spotting that little one which I missed. So we'll presume that to be Hilary, but we will go back in the recording, we will double check, because of course if we don't have a list of attendees, I don't know for certain that Hilary Williams wasn't present. Although I don't recall her being present, but we will check on that and amend that to Hilary Jones. So thank you for that, Martin.
Sorry, Stephen, it definitely was Hilary Jones.
It was, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's clear, so we'll agree that we don't need to go back in.
Yeah.
We'll amend that to Hilary Jones. Thank you, Steve. And then Andrew, please.
No point. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions, amendments to the draft minutes? So we have to agree them on the basis of those changes we've just discussed and agreed. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, Chair, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Stephen. So 1.5 is the action log. And all actions on the action log are closed. But I invite any of the owners of the actions to make any comments, should they so wish, on the actions contained in the action log. And if there aren't any comments, it's very good to see all the actions closed off. So that's the action log. So I would just like to give the opportunity, are there any matters arising from the minutes not contained in the action log which colleagues would like to raise at this point? No? Thank you very much. So in that case, we'll go to section 2, and 2.1 is the chair's report. That's my report. When we started to put this report together, I thought it was going to look very thin because, you know, there's been the summer holidays. I was away for nearly 2 weeks on jury duty, and I thought it would be very thin, and found ourselves in the end looking for ways to condense it into an appropriate size. So the number of it's been a busy period, even though it's been summertime. It's been a very busy period. I'll take any queries or questions. I'll just pick up 1 or 2 things. 2.4 on that in my report, veggies for Velindre. One, it was a very uplifting experience to go to Treherbert and visit veggies for Velindre. The photograph there contains the 2 siblings who were responsible for setting this up. And the allotment is impressive. The brother, he's the one who does all the reading. Morgan does all the reading to make sure, you know, that they know what soil they've got, what fertilizers they use, what plants should be planted when. And Seren is the person who gets the shovels out and digs things up, which it was really interesting. I was there's a shop there, and that picture is taken inside the shop. The shelves behind them are actually wallpaper, not. And the shop has been built out of pallets, which the father helped them build just out of pallets. It's cost absolutely nothing. 2 schools are now involved in having their own allotments and taking the produce that they grow up to veggies for Velindre for sale. So 2 youngsters, I thought, were amongst our young ambassadors. That was absolutely amazing. I'm very pleased. We had a very positive meeting with colleagues from the University of Wales, Trinity St David, hosted by Nicola earlier this week, where we signed the deed of association. And I think, Nick, I don't know if you want to say anything. I think our hopes and aspirations for the future coming out of this are very positive indeed.
And you know, following the approval of the development of Velindre Oncology Academy, clearly this arrangement now will facilitate the growth of that academy through our ability to have our modules accredited, and we're already well under the way with some of the early work on that, and the first academic meeting is planned in the next couple of weeks. So it really will, ensure that not only can we provide the required training for trust staff, for the population of Wales in respect of oncology, but it'll also mean that they'll get the required education recognition of that as well.
So congratulations to you and the team, Nick, for that. I want to boast that I undertook the Dare Valley Country Park walk. I participated in it because it was one of the few activities the charity organises that I could actually participate in because of my mobility problems. I was a bit disgruntled at one point when I got lapped by, because it was 5 circuits around the park, which is a beautiful park, but some of the youngsters lapped me a couple of times. So we made it. My husband came with me. We made it. I have to say, we shuffled over the finishing line. We didn't step over it because we were absolutely exhausted by then. But it was so well organised, and all safety aspects were covered. But the most uplifting thing for me was listening to the stories from all of the families who've all been touched by cancer and have some association with Velindre, to hear their accounts of the care that they received at Velindre. So that was the best part of it for me. Just making sure you know that we've got the Employee Excellence Awards tomorrow. First time in 3 years, I think it is, isn't it, that we've got the Employee Excellence Awards, and they will immediately precede the AGM, which starts later in the afternoon. I haven't put it in this report. I will put it in the next report. I've had a very positive, constructive meeting over at Maggie's, which I haven't had a chance to brief the chief exec on yet, so it wasn't appropriate to put it in this report, but I will report on it next time. And again, I'll report on it next time. We, Matt Bunce and I, spent the morning over at the Welsh bone marrow unit yesterday. An amazing team working there. Alan, they've developed that, they've got 2 rooms, and they've developed that service. We were really fortunate that we were able to meet a donor who was given a donation at the time, and welcomed us into the room to have a conversation with us. And when I asked him, why are you doing this? And his response was, because I've got a chance to make a difference in somebody else's life. I think both Matt and I were welled up at that point. I think there are some things that we could think about to make life a bit easier for them, and Matt will come back to you specifically on that, Alan, but very proud to know that service, and they see that service as run by Welsh Blood as an integral part of the cancer centre, which was the message that they wanted to give us. The other message they wanted us to take away is to think about ways of marketing the service a bit better, because a lot of people still think that bone marrow donation involves implements being pushed into sternum or hips, and that actually is the least frequent way of obtaining bone marrow now. But most of the public still think that it's painful, it involves an anaesthetic and so on. So we'd just like to pick up on that with you. And they said, we've had discussions with Alan, your name was front and centre throughout.
There is, I mean, that's great to hear, Chair, so that's brilliant feedback, and I'll listen to it. But yeah, I think I'm keen to bust the myth on stem cell collection, and maybe there's something about a rebrand and a rename which will part of the Futures programme. So but yeah, happy to hear the feedback, and thanks for that feedback. That's great to hear.
The nursing, so we met 2 nursing staff. There was a student nurse there as well, so that was absolutely wonderful. And then the other final thing, and I will circulate some photos, I had no idea it's British Food Fortnight. So I went into the canteen just to get myself a bit of lunch, and a really festive atmosphere in there with British produce for sale. And the menu has for the last fortnight contained British, faggots and peas, spotted dick, that sort of thing, but a really festive, upbeat atmosphere. in the canteen, and you know, all credit to them because they don't have to do things like that. I came away, I bought some plums, I bought some Caerphilly cheese, I bought a few other bits and pieces, and the plums were delicious. And there were herbs, British herbs, set out so that you could see the British. It was just a wonderful atmosphere. So I'll take any questions on my report, but I wish every day was like yesterday. Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. The very minor point, but I don't want it to undermine the sentiment in the paragraph. In 2.2, paragraph 2.2, the final sentence should read, the opportunity was taken to thank our president. So
I put thank, have I?
And our president. So
yeah, there's a K missing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth.
I'm following Gareth's example of small details now. 2.7, the Walk for Hope. Sunday the 10th, 2023, just add the month so that when we look at it in the future, we'll know when that is. It's at the top of
2.7, Andrew?
Yeah, Walk for Hope. It says, Chair participated in Walk for Hope on Sunday the 10th, 2023, but it doesn't say which month that was. We know it's September, but just for future reference, we put it September.
Yeah, I hadn't spotted that. Yeah. And this is going to be repeated, hopefully, sometime next year. Thank you. Thank you, keeping me on the straight and narrow there. And you will have noticed that this is the second time now I've asked Stephen to produce a Vice Chair's report, because there's so much important activity which the Vice Chair leads on behalf of the organisation, and thought it would be helpful if we shared some of those experiences with the board. Stephen.
Okay, thank you. And as we all know, during that period as well, I also acted as chair on a few occasions. So there's an aspects of acting chair in here as well. So it's only the first three things I was really going to focus on, just to welcome two new excellent appointees at Consultant Medical Oncologist posts. I chaired those panels on your behalf during the absence of it. Two really excellent appointments. Giles was there, obviously, and Steve, and really pleased to welcome our colleagues to the Trust. Second one I was going to highlight was, it's the first picture there. I and Nick and Giles and several others attended a really pleasant little ceremony to mark the successful, I suppose, completion of an education programme for our first assistant practitioner. So that's Becky Bowie in the outpatient department up in the Velindre Cancer Centre. I'm just thinking that rather than me try and explain the relevance and importance of the role of the Trust, whether you perhaps just a few brief words on the importance, and if you want, on the ceremony itself.
Of course. So we are, as the board are aware, undertaking sort of a bit of a workforce transformation review, looking at how we develop our team around the donor, our team around the patient, and who is best placed to provide what care in the current age. So part of that has been really to look at our workforce and who is best placed to provide what care. And we identify that there is a real role for a Band 4 healthcare support worker role, and there's a framework in Wales, a system practitioner framework in Wales, which has only recently been agreed. So our patients in the cancer service were the first to actually take the hold of that, and Becky was already on an educational programme that aligned fully with that, and therefore she was the first to be able to qualify, complete all her competencies, and is now functioning in that role. It provides us with a great opportunity to have, it's different levels of support workers working under the delegation of registrants to actually deliver care to patients that would traditionally have been provided by a registrant. But what is really important, we do that safely, that we do it, and it is aligned with appropriate competencies. I think it gives us a great opportunity for the future to actually really look at who is best placed to provide what care in both divisions. And I know Welsh Blood are also looking at this as well.
And I guess, Nicola, also, if I might add, that individual now has career potential opportunities available, may or may not take them up, but they wouldn't have been available prior to doing this, and they're now a possibility for that individual.
There's a pathway into nurse registration training. It's pre-reg training from this programme that will bring into that, and we also are participating in the part-time training opportunities.
Yeah.
So that what we are trying to do is that we have a pathway for our staff from an apprentice healthcare support worker right through into registration should they wish to do that. That's
just amazing. That's wonderful. So thank you, Stephen. Back to you.
And then thirdly and finally, in terms of what I was going to highlight, just to pick out the visit I made in my wellbeing champion role up to the Welsh Blood Service, where I met colleagues from service, our OD department, and a recently appointed clinical psychologist. And that was just to see the new wellbeing facilities which have been developed on the site there. Obviously, we recognise how important wellbeing is for our staff, and of course for the families of our staff as well, who often can be affected by what is going on in a member of staff's life. So it was very nice to see those facilities. Very pleasant walk around the grounds on some new routes. And as you can see in the picture, perhaps I should explain, that is the beehive. It's not what you might call a traditional looking beehive. Not that I'm an expert on beehives, and it wasn't what I was expecting.
Not the Winnie the Pooh version.
Not the Winnie the Pooh version. So we saw the beehive. Unfortunately, no honey yet, but I'm hopeful that we are the only trust with our own queen bee. We'll have to perhaps research that. I don't know. I did ask Sarah if she wanted to make a few comments, but I'm thinking, as you're here as well, perhaps between the two of you, if there's any brief comments on the wellbeing facilities at WBS and wellbeing generally.
Yeah, I'll perhaps give some general thoughts, and of course Alan can give a lot more detail in terms of WBS. But WBS and its approach to wellbeing is an excellent example of what we're doing across the organisation, because it's putting this at the heart of so much of the activity. We're working very closely in partnership there with trade union colleagues to ensure that wellbeing is at the heart of what we do. And then similarly, some services, of course, we're offering across the trust. So, for example, relaunching a complementary therapy service soon. So, there's so many parts to this. And of course, we know that each of those actually plays a significant role then in enabling people to access activities which can improve their well-being in an environment which otherwise is about work, isn't it? And that marriage of the two is very, very important. So Alan, I don't know if you
Yeah, I just think it's going from strength to strength in small steps. But we're talking about a gardening club, we're talking about a local choir, and we've got a real energy and a buzz about the place. A buzz.
So bum bum.
Is that planned, Alan?
It wasn't, So, but no, I think Sarah said it all really. I think there's been really good engagement with floor to board almost. Union engagement, and just the ideas have been heard, listened to, and we've enacted where we can really. And we put it as a central theme within the organisation, and I think the board will be visiting the service in October.
Yeah,
there'll be an opportunity some type of facilitated tour, as well as introduce you and showcase a few of the things that we've been doing, which maybe haven't been brought to the attention at the moment. So,
looking forward to that. Carl.
So just to add one point, Chairman, we talk a lot about integrated policy. So this is just a small but good example of how all those things come together. We've got sustainability, we've got biodiversity there, we've got social value with the choir, health and well-being for staff. So I think this is a small but important example of how all those things need to come together. And I would also just, she's not with us, but just like to give special thanks really to Rhiannon Freshney, who has got energy, enthusiasm, who's been able to facilitate all those things to happen. She's currently left us. For good reason. She's gone on maternity leave, so we wish her all the very best, and we'll see her in 9 months. But just a special mention for her, because I think colleagues will recognise around the table that she's not doing it all, but she's actually got such joy and energy. She just does really facilitate all those things to happen. So special mention amongst many to Rhiannon. Really.
No news yet, Carl?
Yes, she'll be good.
Yeah.
There is news.
I didn't like to say, but yes, she has had a baby boy. Yes. Yeah.
It's been 9 months is a bit before now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So she's off for 9 months after as well.
So can we note our congratulations on behalf of the board in the minutes to Rhiannon on the birth of her baby boy? Are we allowed to do that in minutes?
Could I
Checking with governance. Yes, Sarah.
add some to Carl's comments? I think that's a really important point, Carl. And what we find, we've got a healthy and engaged steering group, and actually the membership of that includes and includes a diverse range of colleagues who draw all the threads together from these pieces of work, and we see that. So, for example, when we reassessed for our Corporate Health Standard Platinum Award, the colleagues that attended the assessment visit give such, colleagues will remember I fed back some of the comments we received from the assessor, that the energy, enthusiasm and the message that's sent about us as an organisation was significant. So I think that's really testimony to an excellent example of joining these things.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so that's all I was going to highlight, honestly, just to go back to the previous ones. And what I did ask in terms of Becky's achievement, whether the board would be happy perhaps to send congratulations or congratulations be sent to her on behalf of the board for Mark's achievement in qualifying as an assistant practitioner.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so I just think it's a nice message to get back to a colleague that it's been recognised at board level.
Yes. Sometimes there's this board is seen as sometimes can be seen as a bit distant, bit far removed from the bedside and frontline practice, but this is the board acknowledging that. So I think that's a really helpful suggestion, Stephen. Thank you. Any queries or comments or observations for Stephen on his report?
Any typos?
No typos? I'll have to read a bit more carefully next time, Stephen. So we could please go to 2.30, which is the Chief Executive's report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure we can beat some of those things, but just a couple of things. I recognise it's been a really busy summer. And just thank my team in particular for supporting each other to actually get some time off during that period, because it's made it quite tricky at times, but we still managed to push a lot of things forward over the summer period as well. Just a little bit of context before I go into the bullet points on there. You'd have seen in the press the announcements of the financial position of NHS Wales and government. We're not immune to any of that. I mean, you'll see from the financial position, we're still forecasting break even for the year, but the impact of that is broad and it impacts across the board. In terms of how we work, we're working really closely with our health board colleagues through this period. It is a really difficult period, and it's just, I think, important context for us to think about where we are in the system and how that does impact. Even though financially for this year we're still forecasting break even, which Matt will pick up later. I suspect one of the consequences and what you want to see mentioned in here is IMTP. We still haven't heard any feedback on the IMTP. I don't think
we have.
Yeah, that's why I put it in the report.
That's why I was just holding my breath there, thinking.
Yeah.
I could have read it. We have.
Did come in when I was off.
Maybe, yeah. It's done.
Sorry.
If you don't know yet.
So we have had feedback about the IMTP,
it's approved,
which has been approved. Come back to the context is really important for us as an organisation. So thank you for correcting me on that one. Joint exec team meeting, the feedback from the May meeting, you will see attached, and I'm happy to pick up any questions there. As I said in previous board sessions, it was a really positive meeting that we had with them. Challenging and positive at the same time. I think that relationship is still quite strong. Working together, staff session is really important. We've talked about the building our futures together programme, and I think we've kicked off a whole series of these, which again marks a change in the way we engage with people around the organisation. I know Lauren's been to 3 so far.
Yes.
3. I did get that bit right.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're building it. These things take time, and then Sarah, I know, and I will try and get to one sometime, but I think it's really important. That'd be a key part of how we engage together with people and bring them into the programme, because it's, as I've said before and several times this week, it's not a programme about just doing things and systems and process. This is about culture and values and behaviours in the organisation. transformation that we want to see. So the more we engage with people, the more they can become part of it. And it's an active invite that we're looking for. There's something in here about quality and safety system. We will all be aware from the press and all the publicity around the horrific incidents at Countess of Chester and the case that was published. I've kicked off a piece of work in response to a letter from Judith, and I've asked Tina Jenkins in Nick's team and Sue Thomas to lead on that in terms of the assessment we've got here. We will see that as a board. We'll have a discussion about it and we'll feedback to government about where we get to as well. So really important piece of work. And again, it links in with the Building Our Futures Together piece. How do we actually, the more we engage with people, the more people feel free about coming to talk to us. And I spent a couple of hours yesterday in my first induction session for staff, and it was really useful engagement and conversation that we had in there as well. And I think that's everything that I wanted to pick. Thanks for correcting me.
Oh, no, sorry. No.
Take any questions?
Any questions, observations for Steve on his report, please? No, thank you. Thank you, Steve, for that. So we come to section 3, quality, safety and performance. And the first item there, our favourite, is the risk register. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren in the first instance to present this item. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. So the latest extract from Datex in terms of the risks that are being managed across the organisation are in Appendix 1. I'll come on to the Quality, Safety and Performance and Audit Committee view of this since the last board met, but actually the Scrutiny Committee for the Transforming Cancer Services Programme met the day the board papers were published last week. So to summarise the discussion there are a number of the Transforming Cancer Services risks which don't have current review dates because of the change in governance at programme level during August. So they are, just to reassure the board of the conversation we had during that committee, that they have been updated during September. So that will be reflected on Datex for the next reporting period. For Quality, Safety and Performance and Audit Committee during the period, there was very good, robust discussion on the risks themselves, which we'll come on to, and our approach. The main point I wanted to highlight from those discussions was the way in which we want to ensure that the root cause of risks is being properly considered and acted upon. And we discussed that the way in which that would then be evidenced is risks having a profile of reduction of score towards the target score, and the length of time that risks are open, particularly at the same score, should not be significant if the causes are being addressed in the actions. So the practical step as a result of those discussions in the committees is that we are asking all risk owners to, where there's at the moment we've got a field for target risk date, for target risk score, and now there is a target risk date requirement as well. So that's been done manually this period, and most of them have are completed, and following up with the others, and that is now going to be included as a field on Datex for all risks going forwards. So that's a really important part of the ongoing evolution of the way in which we manage risks as risk owners and with our teams, but also provide that transparency and assurance to the board. In terms of the risks themselves, there were 2 risks, and they were the ones that had been open the longest that we considered during Executive Management Board deep dive this period. So one was around the use of email for clinical matters, which we'll come back to, and the second was around an inflation risk for the new for the development of the cancer centre. The inflation risk has actually been reduced during the score's been reduced during the period as we progress towards financial close, the buffer in the annual service payment allowed for changes in inflation rates becomes more certain, and therefore the risk has been reduced. So before coming back to the email one, the only other point that's detailed in 4.3 I wanted to highlight on the content of the risk register is that we've had good challenge in the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee on the number of digital risks and then the implications of workarounds of digital risks then for the way in which we operate our services. And although the report going to Quality, Safety and Performance Committee in September said that these had been reviewed and no systemic or thematic view was, elaborate on this, Carl, but there wasn't a systemic or thematic root cause identified, which meant that the risks themselves needed to change. The Quality, Safety and Performance Committee then asked, well, okay, but actually we want to have a deep dive across all of these risks because there are so many examples of then the impact that they have back on the service. So that's coming back to Quality, Safety and Performance Committee in November. So the update will then be reflected in this paper for the board in November.
Do you want to just comment on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the point I was going to raise, because you're right, we had a good, robust discussion. I think the on your front sheet of this paper, it does say that QSP were assured regarding digital risk. I don't think that was the case, because obviously we've said that we want to do a deep dive in November. And on page 4 of 8 in section 4.3 under the digital risk, it says about evident trends. So that talks to your point that you were just talking through, Lauren. But I think what I've written here is it's more about cumulative issues affecting or risking failures in system and process and clinical time for validation, which is a recurring theme that QSP keep coming back to. So I think if we could amend the wording for that, because I think that talks to exactly what QSP had the discussion on.
Yeah,
I'm happy to share this afterwards with Lauren.
That's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, that makes makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, Stephen, sorry.
I'm saying what?
Have you finished this?
I was just going to say, going back to the email.
Yes.
Risk, as well as what's written there. The Vice Chair has asked some questions in light of the news this week on Newcastle Foundation Trust's digital issues. So,
if she's happy.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was coming back to this, the risk 2465, which is the risk which has been open 662 days regarding email traffic, which of course, in one sense, is concerning. It's open that long, but obviously we've had reassurance along the way. But then I was reflecting on, as you say, the news in the press recently around it. So they reported 24,000 clinical communications being found in the system folder, which were there for review and approval and had been missed. And obviously, I can only go on reports as presented. How accurate they are, I don't know. But that struck me as an example of miscommunication. So whilst I've always been assured or reassured on this, I suppose my question is, I'm going to guess that particular trust didn't know they had a problem until they had a problem. So we know we've got a problem here and are managing it, but I'm just like some assurance, given that we're now implementing a brand new clinical system, which is a completely different system to the one in the trust affected by the problems they had. So it's the Welsh system. But just some assurance that we have some degree of confidence that there are other forms of miscommunication. I'm saying missed, not missed. So as in people are oversight, not miscommunication. So communication has been missed. Given it's a new system and we've already have this issue already embedded in our processes, and I just like some assurance with my IM digital hat on, which I might not get here, but I do think it's important that we are reviewing the communication channels internally, but also outbound.
Yeah. Can I just add to that before I can see some exec colleagues want to come in. My main concern in relation to this particular risk, and you mentioned the 600 and some odd days, in the action plan, we're still trying to identify the root causes and the and what's at the basis of it. And that's the bit that, so what I would like to see is, yes, you must get the root cause identified, because otherwise you bring in solutions which don't, the potential is you bring in solutions and they don't solve the problem. But the time it's taken to do the audit or the evaluation or whatever is a long time. And that doesn't just apply to this issue. It's a more general issue where risks have been open for a period of time. There's a long time to get the audit as to what's underneath, what's happening underneath the risk. So I just wanted to add to that, Stephen, that yes, you must get the root causes, but there needs to be a bit. We need to get underneath things more quickly than we are. Nick.
I'll start. I'm sure Jazz and Rachel will come in there. So firstly, just to give the board assurance. So yes, there is an audit underway in relation to making sure that we are identifying all of the areas from within which there may be a risk. That does not mean we've not taken action. So there is significant work that is multifactorial, and we had this discussion in detail at the Quality Safety and Performance Committee. That there is significant work being undertaken to address what we know are some of the issues and the risks that are causing this, and some of that are aligned with the telephone helpline. So the work that we do in there, we've already revised our escalation processes, which is not using email as any form of escalation, and aligned that with our acute oncology service. So that work has happened and has all been approved and signed off. And there is work aligned with the medical secretaries and a medical secretary review that we've undertaken that's been concluded. So there's lots of things happening, and I think what would be helpful is that we bring all that together.
It would.
Back to committee at the next meeting, just so the board and the committee can be assured that we are progressing. We have had a national reportable incident of late that is aligned with a similar matter. So that was in respect of our referral processes into the organisation from an MDT, multidisciplinary team meeting that happened at the health board. So again, we've done a rapid review there. There is some immediate work that Rachel and the team are leading on to make safe, whilst we are working with DHCW in respect of implementing the electronic referral system. That may take a little bit of time. So we are taking action to address the areas of risk and amend the risk register as and when we're doing that work. So just Jazz, I don't know what you want to add to that.
I think you've covered it really well, Nick. And I think I would agree that, as soon as that email risk was collated, which was from one of my colleagues, he himself has been part of the conversations around, well, what are we going to do about it? So, and we haven't collated the number of things that we've done. So there've been some very simple, immediate things around, copying everyone into this chemotherapy needs to be prescribed. That was a kind of reflex that was happening because, you just did it. You copied everybody you could think of that might be part of the breast team to answer that, and it's completely unnecessarily. And it was really about the way we were working, and so those elements, the quick wins, have been done around, well, stop doing that. Conversations with SACRA, a lot of this was around chemotherapy prescribing in particular. And I think what didn't help, so that this email, risk has been on for the number of days we've described. But on top of that, we then had the change in our system, electronic system. And that created, as part of, in a sense, the kind of new system anxiety, perhaps around a lack of certainty on things, that email business actually exploded again because you were copying everybody into everything because you wanted to be doubly sure. And now that we are getting much more confident about, there's something called the OON, which is the oncology note, the outpatient oncology note, and the importance of that step in the system, because that is your record, your mechanism of communication for the bloods that are needed or investigations, your next appointment, your next, be it radiotherapy or SACT booking, because now we are confident that if you fill it out, it will happen. There's a lot more calmness in this, so people are not frantically, and they don't need to now copy everybody in. And I saw an email trail just this week which was saying, you know, we're all using it properly, we don't have to do X, Y, and Z. So I think that's a bit of assurance. I think we've also wanted to take this one step further, which is because as you get into this issue, it's broad. It's not a single issue. It's also about, you know, kind of principles of communication. And so we're looking at how we can develop those principles. This is how we work in Velindre NHS Trust. This is how we use emails. And so we're also working on that. So I think we've taken on quite a big piece of work as part of this, but perhaps we've not been very good at sharing exactly what we've done to date. And Rachel in particular has been helping us with a lot of this. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Rachel.
I think Jazz and Nick have covered it. I suppose the only other thing to add is we're working with the Cancer Network. So in terms of the referral, they're working with us to help make that flow and the communication, the email trail work. And I guess the other thing is that we are engaged at a national level in terms of work that's happening around that wider issue around email, how we should be using it in the NHS. And Ian Bevan is chairing that board, so we've got a direct in there. So they'll be looking at something national as well.
So that's really, Gareth, I know you want to come in. I'm going to call you in a moment. But what I'd want to say is I'm much more reassured now. I'll call you in after Gareth. But we didn't have the detail that you've just outlined to us, and it just looked as though you were still trying to evaluate what the problem was. So, and it's very difficult to put all that detail in a table, you know, because a table is meant to be, you know, you can't put lots of paragraphs in a table. Had we had that detail, I think we would have been assured that, you know, certain things were landing while we were still investigating the totality of the problem. So I'm very much more comforted to hear. And I think it's important we minute these developments. It's a public meeting that we do minute these developments as you've set them out this morning. Gareth and then Andy. I can't see any other hands at the moment. Gareth, please. Oh, Martin after Andy.
Thank you, Chair. The oral assurance is helpful, but I think the valid challenge back is that on the face of the document in front of us, the risk register, it shows still a pretty poor position. And I think if these things are happening, then they need to be captured somewhere so that we have it in writing in front of us. And we're focusing on the email risk. I think the date on that appears to have been pushed back now to March 2024. And I'd like to understand whether QSP committee has agreed that date going back that far, because on the face of it, it's a high risk and it's been outstanding for a while. But also the other one that is of concern to me is risk 3092, which is around, and that's a 20 and has been a 20 since May. And a lot of these risks, the trend, and then, you know, this is a hobby horse of mine, which I raise at every board meeting, the trend remains steadily the same. There's no decrease in this at all. And I don't think you referred to that, Lauren, in your opening remarks, but I think we can validly want some assurance that these risks are being addressed and that the trend is downwards.
So, Gareth, thank you for that. I'll ask Lauren to come in. That's why I asked that the detail we've been provided with this morning is minuted, so that we will have that record. And we need to find a way to get that detail into the table, or it can be referred to, you know, the table can refer us to a paragraph elsewhere if it's too clunky to put into a table. But I am absolutely agreeing with you. We need to know, because it reads to us as though nothing's happened other than we're trying to evaluate what the cause is. Did you want to come in, on the 24 date, Vicky?
Yeah, I mean, we formally we haven't agreed any dates within the risk register, so that's not a QSP has agreed. The author of the risk register item would need to identify that. I've got a subsequent point after everybody else.
So I hadn't gone into the individual risks yet, Gareth, but you linked that individual risk to Lauren's opening remarks. So did you want to come in, Lauren?
Yes, thank you, Gareth. So the way in which detail of the actions being taken should be captured is within DataX. That's our management tool for risk. And then if, as you say, Chair, there is then more detail in other places through project work or however it's being worked through, then the DataX action log can refer to that. So
yeah,
so this is why we have the extraction from DataX. So there isn't information on managing risks in lots of different places all around the organisation in different formats. So this should be our insight into that. The target risks. So I was trying to link the two things, but apologies, Gareth. So the target risk date is the new field that's been added this governance cycle since the discussions at Audit Committee and Quality, Safety and Committee, and then Audit Committees have consolidated that then to specifically ask for the target date for the target risk score to be added. So those target risk dates have not been approved through governance, and yet they're the first time that the board will have seen those dates. So as you say, that should help with two things: the management of those risks, so that risk profile can now be tracked to the target risk date and score in a clearer way by the person managing that risk and their teams. And then secondly, from a committee and board, clarity on whether that is tracking in the way in which the risk owner and team expect or not. So that wasn't approved. That wasn't a function, as Vicky says, of QSP to approve those new dates.
Sorry, so I'm trying to get my head around this as to who agrees these dates then, because with 2465, who is going to agree that this is not going to be sorted until March 2024?
So that is a point that can be challenged here or in committee or wherever it's presented. It's not formally agreed. The board doesn't formally approve risk scores or that level of detail in DataX, but it's being presented here for assurance purposes. So if that is not providing the board with the assurance in which it needs, and this or any of the committees it's presented to is absolutely right to challenge that, then to take back to the risk owner.
So is that what the action is coming out of this?
Yeah, so that's Gareth.
Well, I think we've honed in on risk 2465 because it's one of the longer outstanding ones. But the reality of it is the same issue applies potentially in respect of each of these risks where they haven't been improved upon, and there is a date that's being inserted in DataX, and what if the board isn't prepared to accept that as the date by which this should be sorted?
Well, that's an appropriate challenge
for us to take back, and I mean, I think, you know, in one sense I would agree with you, Gareth. I think we do need to go away and do this piece of work, and actually what we're not doing, I think we're waiting for completion of the entire piece in order to review the risk, and that's not providing anybody with assurance at the moment.
Yeah,
I think there's a step to say, where have we got to at this point, knowing we haven't completed all the actions?
Yeah, good point.
Which should be able to reassess that risk. So I would suggest we need to do that. And it might be that by March is the date by which we will complete it, but let's articulate what we mean. So I think we need to take that challenge and respond to it.
So, as our minute taker, got those points, please, because I think they were very important points, and I could see nods around the table, Jazz. Now I've got Andy, Martin, and then Hilary. So, and then, no, I think Vicky is before Hilary. Andy next.
Yeah, so it's just exactly what Jazz was just saying. What we need to be doing is, so we've had verbal reassurance from Nick and Jazz today that gives us some reassurance. But if we document that, then we can start to manage this risk gradually down to where it should be, to the target. And I also agree, Gareth, about the target date. We're not going to wait till we've completed a whole big piece of work. It does sound like an action from this is that if we were to document what's already been said, put it in the form of some kind of email code of conduct, etiquette, whatever, because email is a perennial problem. The volume of it is a problem, and this copying in of everyone, because that doesn't work, because the people who are copied in think it doesn't apply to them, or it's not their job to do it. And it is about the risk. It is about this point in the description: emails containing time-critical clinical information being sent to individuals who may not be at work, etc. That's the key point, that in amongst the hundreds and hundreds of emails, there'll be that one that someone misses because they're away, whatever, it gets lost. So if we could have some kind of action, I don't know whether you call it a task, we call them task and finish groups in the university, but some kind of action to document what's been said today, put it in the form of some kind of action plan, code of conduct, whatever, and then we can then actively start to manage down this risk towards the target of 4, where we want it to be by March 24 or whatever.
So I think some of what we've heard today, if captured, which will be in the minutes at least, and then we've agreed a mechanism going forward, because you couldn't put all that detail in a table. It would, it'd be too clunky. So we've sort of agreed that. So I think from what we've heard today, I'm content that the risk is managed down somewhat. I don't know what the new figure would be, but your point is then taken. We need to regularise this now so that we, we receive the updates in whatever format you guys, without introducing a plethora of places where risk is captured. So I think, Andy, those are very helpful comments. Thank you. Martin, I think, is next.
Thank you, Chair. Few things about process, really. Para 3.1 says there are 11 risks, and there actually are only 10. As you rightly says, it doesn't want to say 9 plus 1, but it does make 10. My bigger question is one about not just the process in terms of the numbers game, but the process in terms of what is the board risk register. Is it we simply skim off the top of the highest scoring risks? That's the board risk register. Are there any really, really important ones which would have an impact of 5, would be catastrophic if they happened, but currently are marked as less likely? But I think the board would probably want to know about those as well. So my question is the executive management team or whoever has the risk register looking at things which aren't in numbers terms statistically the highest scoring risks, but the ones which actually could cause us tremendous harm if they crystallized? That's my first point. And the second point is there's a timing lag here, isn't there? Because the risk register is Appendix 1, as you rightly say, is the current risk register. But then the conversations, for example, the one we just had about the inflation reducing, that isn't reflected in the risk register. So the narrative is almost since the risk register was prepared. And that needs to just be explained a little bit better in the document. Thank you.
Martin, thank you for that. I ought to know this, but I'm not quite sure. The variable that would give us what you're asking for there, it seems to me, is the potential impact of that risk if it was realised.
Yeah.
And I can't see how the score. So what's the multiplier? I don't want to get into the detail, but what's the multiplier for impact?
So the previous risk appetite that the board approved in 2020 had 2 aspects to it. So one was the score for each of the domains of risk had a risk appetite set, and then it's any level above that was then reported at committee and board level. In addition to that, there were risks at impact of 5. So in the board appetite refresh that we went through, I lose track, 6 months or so ago, we took out the impact of 5. So previous to that, all the 5s were reported to board, but the problem with that was, as we touched on, so for a couple of times last year, is when scores are being categorised clinically, because of the risk potentially to patient harm that would automatically then put you into a 5, but were a likelihood of 1. Actually, it was cutting out the noise. But so when we did the risk appetite, at the board refresh, we took that out, and we now have got the reporting of by category, with safety being the lowest.
The lower threshold for safety.
A lower threshold for
Yeah,
safety.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. I understand that. What I guess what I'm just asking for is a kind of human intervention, just to look at what doesn't quite make it. Is that something the board should be worried about?
Yeah.
So is there an action from that we've just agreed?
I mean, the level below that gets seen at the senior leadership team meetings.
And through integrated quality and safety.
And yeah, so the way in which we can provide assurance on that, is
shall we take it away?
It is an action. We can
work
think
out
about
how
we
we
do
issue
it.
it. The action would be how to issue.
Yeah.
So we have an action that would be looked at and reported back. Hilary, your hand appears to come down. Is that right?
Yeah, but Jazz has picked up the points that I was going to make, as well as Martin and Andrew. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We haven't got down to individual risks yet. We'll do that next. Steve, do you want to come in at this point?
Mine's been covered up, actually.
Or Vicky then?
I think just related to, as a board, we need to understand the risks against our strategic objectives, which normally we would receive a TAF. Now, as I raised in the last QSP committee, or the last 2 committees, and we've discussed in audit committee and in the last board, we haven't received the TAF now for 6 months. And if we had received a TAF, then we would look at the strategic risks against those strategic objectives. And as a board, we have been unable to do that. And I think we need to stand back from the detail of individual risks, although it's important, obviously, to deep dive into some of those that we're concerned about. But actually, at the moment, we haven't got an ability to be able to see that because we haven't received it for 6 months. So I think as a board, we need to note the concerns, certainly from QSP. We said that we would escalate those. You'll see in my report that's triangulated in the narrative there, because we're not able to see the risks against our strategic objectives, which is a concern.
Could I take that point under 3.2 in a moment, Vicky? A very important point. If I could take it under 3.2.
It leads on from the conversation that we've just had about understanding some of the risks and the low level ones, which is a point that Martin was making, because actually it's how that affects the delivery of our strategic objectives.
Yeah.
So
it's
linked. It is linked to it.
It is linked. Oh, you're welcome. Sorry.
I was going to say, from the sort of public perspective, I mean, the risk register is not a public-facing document, but it winds up in the public domain, and therefore the content from the public should actually say what is happening.
Exactly so.
The risk is being diminished. And I think whatever system you put in place, that needs to. I'm listening to what Jazz says. The risk on the emails has substantially declined, but you wouldn't see that from the risk register.
No, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. And I think that's been taken now this morning. That's been taken on board this morning. Yes, Stephen?
Sorry, I don't want to prolong this part of the conversation, but I do think Martin makes a very interesting point in terms of reflecting on around the fact that we may have instances of high impact risks which will score 5, but very low probability, score 1. Mathematically, that's the same as a very low impact thing with a very high probability, which we probably tend not to worry about. So for me, I think there's an interesting part of this conversation is the 5x5 matrix is actually a very blunt tool, because we score 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And if something is unlikely or extremely unlikely, it still scores a 1. So to use a ridiculous extreme, the risk of the cancer centre being struck by a meteor is so
highly impactful.
It's highly impactful, but it actually would score a 0.0000001. So I'm just wondering whether, in fact, this is part of the challenge we're facing here. Is it's actually relatively a blunt tool, 1 to 5. You know, if it was 50 by 50, you know, so I'm just making an observation here.
So here we go. So what I'm gonna pass that straight back to the team and say, just look at it, because we won't solve this.
No, and it's a well recognised 5 by 5 matrix, is universally recognised. It's just extremely blunt.
Yeah.
I think this conversation reflects the ongoing conversation we need to be having about how to manage risk. I think we've come a long way, but we need to keep the conversation going, because I'm in your place. Whenever I see a number 5, I don't know what the component parts are in my head.
Yeah.
Because that's what drives me to worry or not about the underlying issue. So, I know we've had that discussion before. We ended up going down a different path, but I think how we handle that as an organisation is very important, and actually really important for the people who scored us 5, that we give recognition to.
So I would expect an update on these points to come back to the next meeting. I'd just like to raise some generic points about individual risks. I'm not going to go into the individual risks, but some general points. The risk title and the risk in brief are the same in at least 6 of the risks. And I'm just wondering, therefore, is there the need for the 2 columns, or is something missing from the risk in brief column? Don't need to answer that now, but I'm just noting that. And also, the current controls and the action plan are the same in most cases. So can that be looked at, please? We've looked at risk 2465. We've done that. I would like some assurance at some point about brachytherapy, because that does seem to be an important risk there, with a lot of uncertainty. And Nick, so those are my main sort of generic points. If they could be please picked up, but I just would like Nick to comment on the brachytherapy service. Or is it Rachel? Is it?
So from brachytherapy service, it's a very fragile service, and it's one of those areas where there's shortages of staff. So we were successful in appointing two whole-time equivalents into MPEs, and what's happened is we have 3 in total. 2 of those 3 have now actually found jobs in England because they've moved on for family reasons, different reasons. So while it's still on there, the challenge is still the fragility of the staff and the alignment then to the service. But we have this moving picture in terms of the different group of staff that are causing problems, that difficulty to recruit to. So it still remains that high risk for us at the moment.
And there are a number of single points of failure in there as well. So that must be very concerning for you.
It is, and because of the difficulty of recruiting staff, there is work ongoing looking in terms of how can we do anything internally to build that resilience ourselves through our internal training programs. But there's a timeline associated with that.
Always. But in many respects, you could interpret this as we are doing the training for other health boards to pick up the benefit. Could look at it like that. Anyway, so thanks, Rachel, for that. Hilary, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general point when people are looking at this before the next meetings. I mean, none of the scores have changed on any of these since the trend line was introduced in March. But I'm sure in reality there has been some improvement, must have been, or deterioration in some of them. And this doesn't reflect it, so I think it needs to. Otherwise, the actions that are or controls that are being taken need to be reviewed. And also, just on the point of the target dates, did we agree that these are not board-approved target dates, even though that they're in this board paper today?
The function of the board is not to approve the target dates, as it isn't to approve individual risk scores. But if the board is not assured by the report that's presented, then the challenge is absolutely right to be done here, to then the risk owners to consider that and then brought back through the divisional and exec level governance
Okay,
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but just from a personal perspective, then just because these are new dates that have been introduced in this one, I would like more time to look at to see whether or not it, and in maybe in QSP when we're looking at them, the ones that are pertinent to QSP, that we do look at them in more detail to see whether the target date is a reasonable and an acceptable one to give us the assurance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll put that as an action, Hilary. Thank you very much. Sarah, please.
Just to address Hillary's point, really, is I've got a similar concern in terms of risk 3001 that the score hasn't produced at all over the timeline. And I think when we did the review of the risk with my team, we went through this in quite a lot of detail because of Stephen's point around the bluntness of the 5x5 tool. It was very difficult to justify how we can bring it down from a 12 to a 9, which is what it would have meant, because there's no interval steps we can take. It's very.
If it came down to a 9, it would fall off this.
Yes.
Coming to this board.
But more than that, is it justified at a 9? And we still felt that the organisation and the risk around wellbeing feels too intrinsic to our current situation to do that. So it was a really difficult conversation we had about, well, actually, we have seen improvements. We have got reducing sickness absence levels. We have put a lot more interventions in place, which we've got evidence of making a difference, but not significant enough to bring that score down to a 9. And I think that's exactly the point Stephen made. And that's where we went. We had quite a long, detailed conversation about, well, I felt, yes, it has improved and we should see it tracking down, but actually the 9 isn't justified at the moment. So that's the bluntness, as you say, Stephen, of the tool.
So we're going to have to, I think, exactly. That's a very excellent. That's an excellent example of the difficulty. And if you brought it down to 9, it would fall off visibility in this meeting, which is not what you want at all, for the reasons you've said.
I think that would, and then justifiably, colleagues around this table would be saying, why has it come down to 9?
Yeah.
When we're still saying all these things need to happen, and we're still tracking these various areas of difficulty. So, you know, I think this is a really, especially for something like well-being as an example, which is not fixable. When we use the term, when are we going to fix it or when are we going to solve it? This is not one of those kinds of issues.
Not Tuesday, is it?
So yeah, so that's an example of some of the conversations and the nuanced discussions we've been having around exactly Hillary's point, really.
I don't know what the answer to that is, but we're going to take that away, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to. I don't think any of the assessments are static either. The environment in that particular instance, we might have done an assessment before the Ukraine war and the impact on inflation and everything else, which was going down, and all of a sudden the whole world changes. And go back to my chief exec's report, the impact of all of those things continues. So it then pushes the pressure on stress and well-being back up, but we don't capture the movement. We capture it in a fairly straightforward way in here in terms of numbers and things, but it's a continually fluctuating position, and we try to manage each bit of that at the time and then report quarterly. So I think it's how we capture the narrative.
The important thing is the figures have to be meaningful to us. And I think what is being said that at the moment, I haven't got that quite right, because it's a blunt tool. But all I could do at this meeting is ask the officers to go away and think about that and have that as an action. I've got 2 more hands up, and then I need to move off this agenda item if possible, please. Gareth was first, and then Hilary. Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I could take us to the specific risk, please, 3092, which is the highest rated risk we've got at 20. It's, as I said earlier, it stayed at 20, hasn't moved from there. And the action plans that are set against it are, frankly, not that helpful. And the last one was in June of this year, 23rd of June. And what we don't have against that risk either is a target date for when we're going to reach the target figure we're aiming for. So I think someone, please, as an action, needs to address that risk and give us a bit more clarity and a target date.
Do you want to, okay, do you want to do an update quickly?
So I think in that one, we have seen a number, again, it's similar to...
Richard, you're very softly spoken, which is lovely. I'm just hoping everybody can hear you.
I suppose a similar response to the previous one, there is action that's been taken that now needs to reduce that. There has been a time lag, which is necessary to deliver. So it's part of there's this linked to system being in place, didn't come into fully roll out until last month. So we haven't seen some of those changes until now coming to fruition. Some of it is linked to changing wider pieces of work, which are now seeing an impact in terms of data quality. So we can update that to reflect it and link it back to other pieces of work that are happening. In terms of final line, I guess that probably needs some thought behind it, because some of this is linked again to the DHCR implementation and how we're embedding that into the service going forward. So we have seen significant improvements. We can update that now, but they've only just come to fruition.
That's a similar issue to the email one.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, there's probably a piece of work we need to bring together all the things that we've captured in the both of them, and then we'll review both those risks, because I think it does change the complexion of both of them.
Yes, it does.
But they do that on the paper for QSP.
Well, I was just going to make that suggestion, if I may, because I think we've already said, as Lauren was talking before, about a deep dive in QSP. What I would suggest is that Martin and Gareth are invited to QSP, because you've touched on that before, Martin, haven't you? Just to be able to listen into the deep dive and actually listen to all of the points that are going to provide assurance and are very clear actions, and then we can have a bit more of an informed debate with a written paper, which is your
program. And if we do both of them together at the next meeting, I think we can draw people.
Because it comes back to the point that I made, the cumulative issues around the IT and sort of service performance data entry are many, and we've discussed those in QSP. All of those need to come together in one paper with the actions and suggestions.
And we have agreed in QSP about the invite to Martin, and so that's been agreed, isn't it? That they've been
every
invited.
IM is invited to every.
Yes, I know, but specifically we would invite them for those. Yeah. I think I'm just making the point. We haven't just thought that up here.
No,
There's been agreed in QSP previously. Thank you. Hilary, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick point on, unfortunately, any tool we use to score a risk matrix is fairly blunt, which is why the narrative is important. So coming back to Sarah's point, I totally get it that, and I can see that the target date that's been put in is 2026 to come down from the 12 to a 9. And it is okay for risks to remain level, as long as the assurance is written in as to what is happening is keeping it as it is, and it's impossible at the moment to bring it down any further. So, so that isn't a whole scale review of how we score things going on. I mean, it's just that any tool to do a risk register is quite blunt.
Yeah, thank you. So that we keep coming back to that point. We need a narrative which informs the table, and how and where that gets placed, we leave to the officers to work out and to do. So we've had a very detailed discussion about both the principles of the risk register, and we've looked at individual risks. So we've noted risk levels 2016 and 15, as well as the risks in the safety domain, with a risk level of 12. And we have noted and agreed some further ongoing developments of the trust risks framework. I could just leave it as that, as a summing up, and I'll make sure when the minutes come out that all the actions we've agreed underneath that are captured. If you're content, I can move on to the next agenda item, please, which is 3.2, Trust Assurance Framework, which we've touched on earlier, but I wanted Lauren to introduce this item. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the trust assurance framework has been in place since 2020, and as the board has everyone around this table has been involved in those over the past number of months. We started that process in May and actually had a kick-off discussion at the Strategic Development Committee in May around the review of the strategic risks. That work's then been progressing over the summer, and we had at Quality, Safety and Performance Committee and at Strategic Development Committee during September the outcome of that in terms of the re-articulation of the strategic risks. And in addition, in parallel, Audit Committee has particularly been involved in the approval of a new way in which the trust assurance framework will be presented, and the template has evolved a fair amount through offline discussions with Audit Committee members, and then was approved at Audit Committee as the new template with the role of Audit Committee in terms of the framework. So those things are now ready to come together. Unfortunately, they were not completed in time for this board. The amount of work, perfectly honest, I underestimated on behalf of my colleagues as well, that because the actual articulation of the risks has changed so significantly, which is good, so it's been a thorough review of the strategic risks, actually now filling out the new templates for each of those risks is a significant amount of work. And the other piece that has changed is, rather than individual execs owning risks, one of the things that we've discussed a number of times Executive Management Board is actually the value in this is the way in which we collaborate across portfolios, and there are a number of joint, most of the risks now have a number of owners, which is the right thing to do in terms of how this progresses. But just from a practical perspective, given work done over the last few weeks, is more complicated because it involves meeting with people rather than just locking yourself away. And so it's the right thing to do, and the discussions with the with the divisional teams over the summer has been important as well, and the way in which then this as a tool can be embedded through the divisional governance. So there is a paper with the articulation of the new risks ready, and with the Chair's permission, we can send that out for urgent Chair's action after this meeting, which will then mean that the work that's already underway, it's in the confidence that the board has approved those as the new risks, and then all of that will be brought back through the next set of governance.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm content to accept that suggestion at this point. I mean, there was, in fairness to Lauren, she had prepared a paper, and Vicky and I were in a bit of email correspondence over the last 24, 48 hours, and thought not quite ready to come to board, and it would just raise, lots of discussions, and so we thought best not to have it at this meeting, that we accept your suggestion that it goes out under Chair's urgent action as a document that we'll be able to, hopefully we'll be able to sign off. Martin, Vicky, right, Martin first, please.
I expect we make the same point. QSP is looming, not too distant future. I wonder whether that's the next. So it's November now, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it needs to be available the next opportune moment. Where if it's board before QSP, then that's the way it needs to be. Absolutely. The frustration, to echo Vicky's comments, it's been a long time. In July we asked, Vicky asked in QSP, where is it? And we were given assurance it would be here today. So the frustration is, and I understand it's a big piece of work, but I don't think anyone has any illusion it wasn't a big piece of work. But it's absolutely vitally important we have it to get grounded in all our assurance work. So I'm pleased to know that things are starting to crystallise. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we do need to recognise this annually is a big piece of work in the calendar as well, and it's not just a going through of what we did last time, and I think that's a learning point we've had over the summer, and in terms of the approach as well, because we wanted a really good run around it as well as execs, and we need to make sure we get the time for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on that point, as Steve, because this is covered in the paper which the board will receive. The learning is actually not to do this as a standalone thing over, and the framework going forwards is then linked to the integrated medium-term plan each year.
Yeah.
So as the board approves the integrated medium-term plan, we will also then be approving the articulation of strategic risks alongside that, just in the regular course of annual business, rather than this was, you know, in the framework it said every 3 years we would have the review of the risks, so that it wasn't as if we were doing anything that we hadn't agreed, but because they hadn't been looked at since 2020 in depth, there was then this huge amount of change appropriately.
Thanks, that's a really helpful bit of context, Lauren, to put onto that. Hilary has a hand up. Does anybody else? And Vicky, I don't know who was first.
It was Vicky then.
Vicky first and then you, Hilary. Vicky, please.
I think it's just reflecting, I think, what I said before, and obviously Martin's point. I think it's just, we need to, as a board, recognise that, you know, that the whole point of a TAF is the risks against our strategic objectives. And as a board, we need that opportunity to be able to discuss those and the risks against them as core business to this trust board. We haven't been able to do that for 6 months, and I think we just need to note that in the minutes. I recognise everything that Lauren said in terms of progressing that, but actually any organisation, a gap of 6 months without being able to review our progress and mitigations is of concern. We just need to have that noted.
So that, yes, agreed. We've noted that. Hilary, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think for me, the lesson to be learned from this is, until the new TAF is approved and in place to move forward, we should still have been receiving the updates against the old TAF, so that there is board assurance around risks that have already been approved at board level. So at the moment, we're in limbo. We don't have either. And I'm not sure whether I'm comfortable about approving under Chair's action the strategic risks. I know I haven't seen them yet, and we might all go, yeah, okay, that's fine. But I think a board discussion should be available, even if we meet online for an hour to talk them through.
Thank you. I mean, the reason I did suggest that is that they will have gone through the 3 of the core committees for endorsement. Yeah. So already QSP and Strategic Development Committee, and then Audit Committee in October. But I appreciate, but what you're saying is different, that even though they're endorsed by the individual committees, having one unified board discussion is another matter. So I understand.
Just to comment on that, I think Hilary's point is we've seen previous versions.
Yeah.
No, it's this version.
It is this version.
Yeah. September.
So are we agreeing an additional meeting, or are we agreeing that it can be done by correspondence? Under Chair's action is what I mean. What Hilary's suggesting, that there should be a
well, I'm happy to you know, maybe we need to see the paper first to see whether. But when do you think it'll be coming?
It's ready. It's there. I just need to agree the approach.
It wasn't ready, you know, in sufficient time for this. We didn't want to send it out yesterday afternoon, for example, which was when it was ready, or yesterday, whatever.
Yeah.
So
still very late.
Because we'd been having a long discussion then about the timing of board papers being uploaded. We'd have had that discussion instead. So do you want to circulate it in the first instance, and then if colleagues can get back to Lauren, who will talk with me about the best way forward. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to add. I was just going to add that it's hard to form a view without having seen the paper. So I'd be in favour of us deciding, once the paper has been circulated, whether we can approve it electronically or whether we need a meeting to discuss it.
Okay, that's really helpful. So I think we've have a way forward. So we'll circulate that as soon as we're able after today, Lauren, because we're in here all day. And then if colleagues could send their comments to Lauren in the first instance. Yeah. And then we'll have a discussion about the best way forward. And so comment on what you think the way forward would be, not just on the content of the paper. Thank you. Are we scheduled a break at all?
11:30.
11:30. It's 11:35. So should we have a break now?
Yes, we can take stock.
I think we should have a 10-minute break, colleagues. So to those of you online, don't log off. But if you feel you need to go make a cup of tea, see you back here in 10 minutes. So Bethany, croeso nôl pawb. Welcome back, everybody. And I'd like to extend a very warm welcome. We're moving now to section 4 on the agenda because of timing issues, 4.10, in which we're going to have a presentation on IRS, the Integrated Radiotherapy Solution. And we're most grateful to our colleagues, to Tony, Helen, Kathy and Tom for joining us this morning. It's a very important piece of work that the Trust is involved in, and the board is very keen to hear about it. And then when I know some of you have got, Tom, you've got a clinic or something, you've got important work to get back to. But if you want to stay and join us for lunch, that would be fine. But I'll leave that to your individual workloads to sort out. But you're very welcome, and the board is very pleased to receive a presentation from you. Just need to check that Tony's presentation is available for us to look at.
It should be.
Hello, Chair. Yes, we're just sorting it so we can put it on the screen.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
We'll get it left, Tony, and then we'll start. Have we got it in our packs? I don't think we have. Yeah. Oh. 4.1. Yeah, we have got it in our packs. Does anybody not have it in their papers? Oh, there it is. Anyway, so Tony, over to you. We've got about 40 minutes, 45 minutes for this session.
Okay. So there might be an issue because I'd probably try to hide things from people. So whoever's got control, I guess I'll leave it to their creativity to.
You just say next slide, they'll move it for you.
Yeah, there'll be several next bits of text, I think. So what we've come to talk to you about is the integrated radiotherapy solution, which is been a part of many of our lives, well, for quite a while, 5 or 6 years even. So if you could go to the next slide. So what we'd like to communicate, and probably until the slide fills up, I think we'll have to do that every time. That's why I didn't anticipate it. So is basically what are the features of the integrated radiotherapy solution, or the IRS. I do want at the end to feel that we've succeeded in communicating that this isn't a minor program. It is a very big program. I'll come to later, but I'll say it now, that the Varian are the biggest radiotherapy manufacturer in the world by some distance, with about 70 to 80% of the market share. This is the biggest order they've ever had. And that we've also bought kits in a different way, that we are just extending our Varian kit. We are transferring it, we're putting all our eggs in one basket and moving to a single supplier. So, they tell us, and it's easy to agree, that it is probably the biggest radiotherapy implementation project ever in the known universe, even to exaggerate it.
That's nervous laughter, Tony.
And just the bottom line is, to get the most out of it, we have to do it obviously safely, efficiently, and we have to implement all of it. If we don't implement all of it, then we lose those benefits of efficiency, which, as
radiotherapy becomes more complex and more labour intensive, we need to realise so it doesn't cost us more money. Next slide, please. So what is it? So the radiotherapy is a very complex treatment modality. It isn't about machines, which is what often I'm arguing with people we shouldn't concentrate on. It's about a lot of imaging, a lot of treatment planning, making sure the right dose comes out of the machine, which isn't as simple, I think, and involves a lot of computing systems. Now, current systems at BCC, for various reasons I'll briefly mention later, they are more complex than any other radiotherapy centre, and they're certainly more complex than they need to be. And the purpose of the IRS is to simplify the situation, to get rid of a lot of those complexities. So the focus is on how we get the best plan, the best treatment delivery for the patient, and the best ways of following up. And we're not concentrating on moving data around the department, signing bits of paper to authorise the same thing multiple times, and then checking that the right data has arrived in the right place. Because the data, when we move data, they need to be checked for various reasons, including good practice and the checking of, because there's so many data, that is quite a difficult task. Next one, please. So this will animate with the 4 parts of the IRS. So there's the treatment devices which have come up, then the treatment planning system which will come up beneath it, and then the patient dosimetry system. There are other bits of the IRS that fit onto bits of these which are required. But the hub of it is the oncology information system. So that is the system that transfers data around the department between the planning system, the imaging planning system, and the machines, check that everything's okay. And in most centres, it uses the electronic patient record for at least the radiotherapy part of their cancer treatment, and in some centres otherwise. Currently, we've got 2 of those, which is one of the reasons why it is more complicated, and we are one of, I don't know any other radiotherapy centre that has 2 oncology information systems. And obviously the IRS is that. We have one, that database which contains all the patient's data, the treatment planning system, the patient dosimetry system, and the treatment devices all get their data from that. So you authorise something in the OIS, that propagates around the department, and that is a long way away from what we do at the minute, where we authorise stuff in several places, or even that becomes too complicated, so we don't authorise it. We rely on other systems. They're safe. I'm not saying that what we do is unsafe, but it is inefficient and very time consuming. Next slide, please. So the current situation where we are, we bought one IRS from Varian, who are the biggest manufacturer. The first phase of the project has started. We've had the first machine installed. We've had the new treatment planning system installed. We've commissioned the beam data, and we've implemented the IRS for one treatment site, which are prostates. So there are a few indications within the prostate, but we've done that. And all of that has run to the anticipated timescales. That's not where the good news stops, but that is we're only a short way into it. There are quite a few complications that will affect the timescale for some time. They're quite numerous. I think we've really got to sort out the relationship between the radiotherapy service and all the IT that fits in that with DHCW, because that perhaps isn't going as well as it could do, because that's more complicated than either side estimated, and there are problems with that. Because there's been delays in buying it, other projects going on, our current fleet of accelerators are very old. And we'll lose 2 of them in May when they go. They were end of life last May. We've extended them for a year. That's as much as the manufacturers are willing to support before they go end of life on the 1st of May next year. And then the last 2 of those elected, that's the other big. They go end of life in 2026 before NPCC opens, which is going to cause us a capacity issue. Because they're old, they're breaking down a lot. And I think when we wrote these slides, I think one of them had been down for the best part of a month, and that does cause significant issues in getting the patients through. And patient numbers are increasing post-COVID. The complexity is increasing, you know, quite rightly. The medics want more complicated treatments, which do a better job at delivering the patient. And well, obviously we can't just say no to any of that while we embark on this journey to implement everything, which is going to take at least 3 or 4 years. Next slide, please. Right, so I think what I'm trying to say, you know, there are lots of problems with the current ways of doing radiotherapy at Velindre. The fleet is aging, the systems don't talk to each other enough, but at the end of the day, the patients get as good a treatment as they would elsewhere. But we need to refresh the fleet and improve all the IT, which is what we bought the system for. But there are the issues that we've got. You know, the CANISC replacement has caused quite a big strain on the service. I mean, some of the delays that get introduced, like within physics, we don't get that involved. This big business, which seems to be a big problem. I mean, a big problem. Well, as we're introducing new systems, we're actually temporarily making it more complex. So we've gone from loads and loads of systems. We're introducing a new system which has to run in parallel, and we've got to train everybody, all the consultants, all the physicists, all the technologists, all the radiographers, all the people getting business intelligence from the new system. So that's hundreds and hundreds of people. And obviously, if you get the training wrong, then we can't use it efficiently. Next slide, please. And pray for that. So, again, why do we need it? So, over 10 years ago, we made the decision that we would move from an all-variant centre to be a mixed vendor centre. You know, we're bigger than most centres, so it might have made a bit more sense. But for financial reasons, we elected to make an offer which Varian couldn't beat, which ended up having these mixed 2 manufacturers with 2 OISs. We believed some of their promises, which turned out not to be true. So we had extra planning systems coming on, and we ended up in a situation which everyone else has tried to avoid, which has led us to our problem. So that became very burdensome to the department. It meant that you just transferring from, if one machine breaks down, you can't necessarily transfer the patient without replanning it. That involves many hours of people drawing volumes on a different planning system. A new plan from scratch, that all has to be checked, data transferred, and stuff, and then you know, combining the doses from both machines became really complex. We tended not to do that. Next slide, please. And this is the visual where we were. So some of us who've been in Velindre since they were since Velindre in black and white have observed all this. So in the early 2000s, we had 3 systems really. We had a planning system, we had some variant accelerators. Then we added loads and loads of it. So we've got a situation now where we've got all those systems along the bottom. I haven't included CANISC and other things that are, or WCP and WPAS, which are part of it. So the effect of the IRS is to go down to this single vendor, three parts to it: the planning, the OAS, accelerators. There's 2 bits which will probably remain from legacy. That direct organ is a AI-based system that delineates organs at risk, which speeds up the planning process. And Edge VCC is an AI-based planning system that's developed at Velindre, and it compares easily with any commercial systems available. There is a problem introducing that into the IRS, but that is just a manpower issue really, which hopefully we can sort out. So that's where we're aiming to get to. Next slide, please. So basically, what I've said really, we did all that and we realised that and proved empirically that working in a mixed vendor environment is poor. I think, you know, we had people come down and talk to us as the site, what's the reference site for doing things incorrectly, and talk through how difficult it was if they were thinking about moving, you know, to a dual vendor centre. And most people, in fact, so all people, you know, don't do that. So some time ago, a paper was put in by the service to go to a principal provider, where we'd have a single provider for the OAS, and then as machines were replaced, that vendor would supply those. That got well, it's not sidetracked, but because of NVC, the project to start NVCC was imminent. I mean, it was felt for good reason that that project would be delayed and that would be considered in the round. And of course, all major projects get delayed. So we got to the position now where we needed to change machines and by the IRS. So that's why the IRS is now, we'll come to it in a minute, why there are phases to it. Next slide. So, and that's the concept that we, that all of the data reside in a single database within the oncology information system. So then the planning, all the other bits of data, or the other systems that require it, get their data from that. What you change in one system propagates through to other systems. Wherever you are in NHS Wales, you should be able to look at the images as they're taken on the set, as they're done in planning. You should be able to approve stuff, ask questions, intervene wherever, without having to move to physical computers, which may be in a different building or in a different part of the country. But there's still an interface required into external systems. So for us, they're generally WCP and WPAS. And that's what we wanted. And that's what we specified. And we did, I'll probably go to the next slide now while I'm talking. So that project was started. We found that there is a problem in the radiotherapy market in that there are two vendors who I probably say aren't very good. They do develop, the kit is good. They don't quite understand why you would want to integrate everything. It's very difficult to change vendors, so there's not a great advantage to making things slicker. In some ways, they always want to say the next thing rather than sort out problems. So basically, we thought, could we develop a system and specify it to work in the way that we wanted? And we spent several meetings with vendors seeing what we could do. And at the end of all that, it was too complex to build a system ourselves from various components from various manufacturers. So what we came up with, well, we would give all the problems to one of a successful vendor, and it was the principal provider. So that has an advantage in that the principal provider is now responsible for everything. That if a machine breaks down, whichever one it is, if a connection breaks down, whichever one it is that vendor's responsibility to sort it out. The negative, of course, is all our eggs are in one basket. So there are bits we fair enough eventually won it. There are types of radiotherapy machines that they don't sell, so they're not open to us through this relationship with them. Something else would have to be negotiated. But weighing up the pros and cons of such an approach, we went through a competitive dialogue which took a very long time. And when we got to the end of that, 2022, we placed an order, which was signed, I think, the 20th of November last year, with Varian to supply all of the kit. Next one, please. And this is what they came up with. So in IRS terms, we have 3 phases, which are different to the phases that are used to describe NVCC. Hopefully that won't confuse anyone. So phase 1 is 2 healthy machines. First one is in clinical use. 2 are the same in phase 2. That's at the radiotherapy satellite unit. I appreciate I haven't changed the acronym the right way around there. And then 6 of those halcyons, 2 true beams, which are similar to the ones we've got at Velindre, but so more of a conventional type accelerator, and a brachytherapy system and a deep X-ray system, which you can see on the right. So the halcyon is a fairly new bit of kit. So the concept behind that is it gets rid of a lot of legacy equipment you don't really need. You can't really see it it's like the actual accelerator itself, where the X-rays are generated for treatment. It's very small. It spins around the patient in an enclosed cover, unlike a conventional accelerator. So that means it can spin quicker which means you can image the patient because the imaging arm also spins round and deliver the treatment in a quicker time. There's no couch rotation, so that there is a limitation in that, but that means that it does make the quality assurance thing you have to do in the first thing in the morning and on a monthly basis a little bit simpler. And there's only one energy as well, so that also makes it quite a bit simpler. So it should be more reliable, it should be quicker, but it does have a few limitations. So that's the platform, which is most of them. So see, the Halcyon to Ethos is a upgrade, which is purely software, and you get a new cover, but it's incredibly expensive. So what that allows you to do, so conventionally we would image the patient, before they start their treatment in the CT sims. That would then be the basis for the dose plan, which would be done within the pre-treatment radiotherapy team. Then that plan would then get sent to the machine. Then we would image the patient and check that any anatomy changes that the patient had experienced aren't that significant. And if they're not, it might be a slight movement is required, the treatment's delivered, and the patient goes home and comes back the following day. If there are significant anatomy changes, then that gets then sent back to the physics team within treatment planning. They might do a replan or make some correction. And then if it's not too big a change, the patient gets treated and they get that correction the following day. Or if it's too big a change, the patient might have to be rescanned and replanned. The Ethos platform attempts to change that by you do the plan as normal. When the patient comes down to the set, they get imaged, and then it is possible to replan on that image of that day. You couldn't do that before because it took too long to plan and the image quality wasn't particularly good. Bit of calculation. So Ethos software update, which allows you to do that planning before the treatment is delivered, which should make it more accurate, enabling the safety margins we apply to be reduced, which should reduce toxicity to the patient. There are some compromises in that, so it's not a no-brainer that every patient would benefit from it. But that is we will eventually have 4 of those NBCC, 2 in the satellite, 2 standard Halcyons, which will be the workhorses, and the standard accelerators. And on top of that is the brand new brachytherapy treatment delivery planning system and a deep X-ray system to replace the one that we've got already at Velindre. Next one, please. So, as well as that, there's a co-produced service and maintenance model, which means that we do that in conjunction with Varian. They supply some staff, we supply some staff, and they've got quite challenging uptime targets. We've also bought from them some consultancy work that will help us. They will analyse the workflow that we could do and then work with us to come up with the best system. They're also contractually obliged to calculate, or we calculate, and they've said if we buy that system, we will get certain benefits in terms of efficiency. And if they don't get those, then they don't get the full payment for the solution. And there's also a research and development agreement that they will ring fence about 166k a year for us to bid internally, and that will always go to a Velindre project. They've also got quite a big research that we can also bid against and have a partnership with. But that obviously, of that 166k is ring fenced for Velindre and will only be given to the Velindre project. Next one. So it's quite a big project, and we're doing it. I mean, it's pretty much said before, but the downtime of the existing fleet is not as good as it could be. We've got increase in demand. We'll also try and meet more challenging waiting time targets while we still got these complex systems in place. There's a lot of work with NBCC and SIU that we need to do. And we've got the imminent end of life notices for the elector machines, which is going to cause an issue for capacity, which we'll need to manage. So there are solutions for that, but that is an issue. Next one. So that Right, so that's pretty much what I said before, so I won't repeat it, but I will repeat it. I'll say, it is a major implementation program, which shouldn't be underestimated. And it requires a lot of staff to do it, some of which have been recruited. Next one, please. So the implementation is done via, that's a diagram of the work streams that we use, have been using. I won't go through them all. I guess hopefully they're the ones you would hope to see. But you can just see the clinical commissioning of the machines is one of many, and that's the one is often concentrated on inappropriately. Next one. So what we mean for the patients? Well, if we implement it fully, I think we will have the most efficient radiotherapy system available. If we fully engage with that, then we could have reduced waiting times, and we should have the shortest waiting time. I mean, that does depend, obviously, that we complete the project, staff it appropriately, and we all, everyone embraces the new ways of working. We've got better imaging if we fully embrace ethos. We will have the best-in-class adaptions for the majority of patients. There are some patients where that won't be possible. There should be some online access to appointment times and week, and patient-reported outcome measures there's an app that we bought with the system. There may be some work how that fits in with all Wales systems doing a similar thing. And at the end of it, we should, all of it is obviously to do the ultimate aim of radiotherapy is to hit what we're trying to hit and miss what we're trying to miss. And if we can do that better, obviously we will save money later. Well, that's better for the patient because it gives the patient a better outcome. And we should avoid costly interventions later in the treatment journey. Next one, please. For the staff, well, we should get more job satisfaction and working in a cutting-edge department. We should be spending less time sending data around and checking that it's arrived and then moaning at people when it hasn't arrived because the wrong thing's been sent. And we'd be able to spend that time doing what we should be doing. We should be a better employer for that. There should be increased opportunities for R&D as a consequence of the research relationship with variant, which should lead to a lot more, I think, opportunities for research than just the ring-fence grant that should allow. And every member of staff will be affected. There isn't anyone that works in radiotherapy and several staff beyond that. They won't be affected by it. I say it's a benefit because for some people it will completely change the way they work and what the work they do. Like some people might think that's a bad thing. Some people might think that's a good thing. Then next slide, please. So there are challenges. We also need to do this while we don't let the quality of care that we currently deliver diminish. There is a bit of tension. Varian have got to implement certain parts of the system for us to realise the benefits. That doesn't always fit in with what we need to do to keep the service running. So there is a bit of an ongoing conversation that I think we'll have for the next 14 years with Varian about that. It's probably more significant at the minute than it will. Resources are very scarce. Key staff leaving has a very significant impact. We've had someone leave relatively junior recently in physics, and that's caused quite a big hole. And because of the way the increments work at the minute, which I've never understood the logic of, it is very difficult for senior staff, so 8A or above, to move because it just doesn't make sense financially. I think changing everyone's work practice, some people love change, some people hate it. So that will be a challenge. Training 300+ people multiple times because the systems will change and they'll be upgraded. We will have to adjust the way we do things is a big challenge. I've repeated the last one on the previous slide. So, next slide, please. So there's a lot of risks. think there's it is a massive change. We are going to have to dual run this new system with the old system, and that is not without its challenges. I think every project I've been involved in all my time in decades in radiotherapy, it is not possible to underestimate the amount of time, or overestimate rather the amount of time you need for training, even when you double that allocation. We do need to find solutions to the drop in capacity we might have. We know when the electors go end of life in 24 and 26. It is quite stressful at times for various reasons, and we need to make sure that we don't put too much pressure on our staff, who have sometimes got quite difficult discussions to broker, particularly in the last one, the discussions between Vary and GHCW, where we depended on them doing things, and that often that's completely outside our control. And that's a risk in itself, really. In that, I don't think Varian are used to interfacing to people that we need to. I think that the data transfer to national systems is less of a, it's not done in the same way in England and elsewhere. Next slide, please. So,
Tony, can I just, we've nearly been 30 minutes, so I think you've got quite a lot of slides left to go, and I don't know if others want to come in. We might have to deal with kind of next steps in another session. Some of us have lived through all the stages that you outlined right at the outset, but I just wondered at this stage if other colleagues want to, if members of the board have got any observations or queries, or if any colleagues of yours want to make any comments. Oh, look, see, whoa, look at this. See, so I just wanted to give the opportunity, otherwise we would have just let you carry on and then had to say goodbye and nobody would have had the chance to say anything. So we've got Jazz, Vicky, Andy. Can't see anybody online.
I just wonder whether.
And Carl. But I wonder if Tom or Kathy or Helen want to say anything.
Respond, perhaps listen to we may have different colleagues may respond dependent on the question.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. I leave that to you guys to organise that. So Jazz first, please.
Yeah, I think it's more of a comment than a question, but just to kind of congratulate the team really for getting us this far, and for really just capturing that excitement of what this means for us. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal for us as a trust to be embarking on this. We've already done, we're into phase 1, we've got 1 machine in. We will be the envy of all other radiotherapy centres in the UK, potentially in Europe, to be able to have the system in place. And I think and that sort of what it means for us in being able to deliver the care in the way that we want to deliver it for our patients, but also for staff, attracting staff to come and work here. This has got to be a beacon for us. Job descriptions, how we promote ourselves to come and work here, because you will have access. You will have access to a research grant that's part of the Varian. That's the sort of thing that people are looking for, are interested in. So there's this huge goal and kind of pot of gold, if you like, that we're working towards. The journey is not easy, and it's a lot of work to try and do the 2 things in parallel. And there are things that are being compromised now as a consequence. I mean, I think that the research space is one of them. Can't do everything that we want to do at the moment, even though we've got studies that we could participate in, because we can't fit it in right now. We're constantly working towards how we can do that better. So and not to underestimate the whole sort of training that goes with this highly regulated space, which we work in, and all those logs, and everybody needs to be accredited, etc. So that machinery behind that sits behind this, I guess, is significant, and we've got to support the team here to get us through these next few months are going to be critical, but thank you.
So one new machine is installed and in use. Another machine is being installed. Oh, so it hasn't arrived yet.
So no, they're currently refurbing the bunker. So the refurb
Right.
work should conclude just in advance of the 21st, and delivery is currently scheduled for the 21st of October.
And we're hoping that we'll have a third as well.
Our vision for that one, the second one getting clinical is end of this year, early start of next year, so literally new year time for the second machine
To start
clinically
being used for
around.
patients. Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Is as to be scheduling our breast patients onto that machine.
But as a board, we're trying very hard to, get the new machines in. We did think at the outset that the new machines would all go to the new cancer centre, but responding to the demands and the capacity in the department, we've been trying as a board to precipitate getting the new machines in. Although there will be extra work at some point because they'll have to be moved to the new cancer centre. But that's been our response to try and work with you to make sure that you've got what you need.
And I think, Donna, it's important as well, Tony's helpfully outlined our first clinical machine was to support prostate patients. As Helen just said, the second pathway will be for our breast patients. And that's also around our future planning and how we move through each of the three phases.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 2 at the satellite centre. Many of you have been involved in the business case, which is that case is for predominantly prostate and breast patients. So that's why, despite the complexities and challenges that we've got, the focus has been on those two treatment sites. They're also our largest volume cohort of patients. And it is the daily juggle that we do between making sure we've absolutely got the ability to maximise out the treatment capacity for our patients that we have now, whilst we're planning services for the new ones that we will have.
Yeah.
And that tension being, as the old, aging, tired, very end of life equipment fails on the ones that we are removing, those have been the treatment machines that have been delivering for prostate and breast patients. So this is our big challenge period now as we transfer over our two great volume sites. But I have to say a huge thanks to all three clinical colleagues here, because that is the daily juggle that we do, but we're absolutely on it every day, day in, day out, making an absolute focus over. We've got to make sure that we've got those clinical machines up as quickly as we can. And Tony's taken us through, all of those boxes that you saw on that complex slide. That's the complexity of all that was there before. We're trying to slim that down, but to get to that slim down position, we need to open the new one. So we add a period of complexity, but that's what we're working through because the team are dead excited to get through all this. So as you could have talked about, we need to get to the very end of this, and then we get to see the real excitement, the real benefits, the new opportunities that the kit's going to provide us. And I don't mean machines, I mean the whole thing. We've just got a bit of a challenge to get us there in the meantime, and that's how we transition through what we've got now and where we need to go.
That's really helpful context. Kathy, thank you for that. Andy wanted to come in, and then Steve, you want to come in as well. And Vicky. So Andy next, please.
Yeah, thanks. It's really helpful, and absolutely appreciate the size of this challenge. And it'd be really helpful because I haven't had a chance to visit radiotherapy. This aspects of demand capacity, what it sounds from Kathy, you were just talking about breast and prostate as the main, but of course there'll be many others. Could you give us a sort of high level sense of numbers of patients, how much that's increasing on the demand side and the size of the department? You've got obviously specialists you've got oncologists, you've got physicists, you've got all sorts of technical expertise. They're really thinking about that recruitment, retention of staff, this sense that we're moving towards something which will really pull people in and make Velindre an attractive place to come to work for those skilled staff, and also linking to things like the Velindre Oncology Academy and so on, so that there's the covering all the training. So what's the sort of context of the size, both on the demand side and the department? Can you give us a sort of sense of that, please? Sorry, lots of questions there. I do apologise. Yeah.
So patient demand. So approximately just around 50% of our demand comes from breast and prostate. So it's a huge volume of our workload.
Now, we have made some changes through COVID, which has meant that some of our dose and fractionation changes have hugely impacted on our breast cohort patient, which has put complexities at different parts of the pathway, but made it a little bit simpler for us in terms of activity from a treatment delivery perspective. And there are opportunities to do that with prostate patients, but there are additional complexities that we need to work around in order for that to be deliverable. So we can look at demand in terms of pre-COVID, and we know what sites we'd be looking at next in terms of our volume of patients. And Tom, being one of our head and neck consultants, we have an increased demand in head and neck patients. COVID has had an impact, and we still haven't seen lung patients recover in terms of demand in the same way that they were pre-COVID. So that is still a changing picture depending on different sort of screening that's undertaken at Health Board. There's any impact on waiting list initiatives at Health Board. So that is ever changing for us. What we're having to do is currently map out those demand changes and change our capacity based on that demand. Because as Tony said, we've got 2 vendors at the moment and they're not all able to deliver the same thing. So it's a really complicated process for us to ensure that the capacity is in the right place at the right time. What the IRS should do is enable us to have a single solution so we'll be better able to manage increased demands and how we deploy that capacity. In terms of the wider service, I'm really fortunate. I don't have a huge turnover in radiotherapy, and what we tend to have is a very good recruitment into radiotherapy from Cardiff University as one of our main suppliers. What we have had is some issues with external recruitment that was impacted as a result of a streamlining process that we had, which meant that a lot of universities from England didn't support recruitment in Wales because a lot of the vacancies were taken up by streamlining. Streamlining isn't there anymore. So we have to reprofile how we do our recruitment for new recruits coming through. Unfortunately, COVID has had an impact on us having experienced staff move in, so it meant that we've had a lot of internal movement, and that I'm really fortunate in one way that I have a very young department, so we have got the risk of turnover of staff as they come up to retirement age, but it does mean that there's less experience there. But also we're in the middle of a huge change program, so it's going to be new for everyone. So that isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's just a fact. So from a recruitment perspective, it is something that we already put out there, that we are going through these major change programs, including the opening of the satellite unit, which gives people opportunities to work closer to home for some of our staff that might live in that area. But we've also got interest from senior colleagues in England that want to relocate to Wales but want to work in a smaller department. So we're already having those conversations with staff. I don't know if that answers all your questions, Andy, but you're more than welcome to come for a visit if you'd like to.
I wonder perhaps whether Tom just went us a little bit about the other treatment sites and the plans and changes.
Yeah, so I think when you look at demand and capacity, I think a lot of people think how many patients are coming through, how many slots have we got on the machine. Yeah. There's a lot more to it than that. You've got to think of every department, from the doctors seeing the patient. We know we've got a major shortage in the workforce there, to them having their planning scan. So what's the capacity on the CT scanner? Contouring, one of our biggest issues probably in terms of having a really efficient pathway is doctors having protected time to draw around and design the radiotherapy. If you're a surgeon, if you were operating, you would have a list. You'd go to your theatre and you would do your list. Doctors are doing their contouring random times during their lunch, after work, just trying to get it done. So having that, thinking about the demand on that time, and then physics as well. Sometimes they'll get 60 plans for a week and they can do that, and then the following week it suddenly jumps up to 80. We're getting all these peaks and troughs. There just isn't enough manpower. We can't trying to find a way to deal with these peaks and troughs. that when we ever think about demand and capacity, we can't just think of machine time. We've got to think of all aspects really.
Yeah.
And that probably also comes into our workforce plans. You know, there are some of those jobs. You know, we know doctors' time is always a challenge. You know, there are people like physicists, NMOs, non-medical outliners. So you can think of other staff groups that could do the job of the doctor. But then what you tend to do is move the problem around. You take the physicists from planning to contouring, then they can't do their planning. So it's a major juggling piece.
Just on that contouring, to prolong it, but you mentioned machine learning AI very briefly, and I know you have an interest in that because intuitively you will think if you go forward 10 years that some of that things would, you know, what might be more kind of manual process now, there would be softwares which would help and alleviate some of that time. Is that fair to say in terms of the contouring and dosing and so on, the models, predictive models to come on to help?
AI is going to be huge for us and make a big difference, but we're just not quite there yet. You know, what they tend to be doing at the moment is focusing on the easy bits, the organs at risk.
Yeah.
Things that are very easy to draw around, which is fine because that takes time.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't think we're at a point where we could trust AI to draw around an actual cancer. You know, we will get to that point, I'm sure, but
So I'm needing to move us on
Sorry,
because we're already out of time, and I've got Carl and Steve and Vicky. But Vicky, you were next, I think, and then Carl, and then I'll ask Steve, and then we will have to move on then. Vicky.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just really reading through the presentation before today. Obviously, you realise the enormity of what the whole project is about. In the presentation, you set out about the patient outcomes, the expected outcomes, which is great, and obviously the staff benefits or patient benefits and staff benefits. But I noticed you changed your wording in the presentation because there was very positive in the presentation, and you were saying, articulating if and it should, which was perhaps expressing your anxiety about some of the projects. So I guess for us as a board, what can we do to support you to get it back to realise those benefits? There's lots of risks and challenges in the presentations.
I think obviously, yeah, because I can ramble on and I obviously showed that. I think the last slide is about what I think the senior management, whether that's board level or the cancer centre, needs to do is that, you know, this is a big project. The outcome is we make it more efficient, we get better potential of better patient outcomes. And then I guess I'm a bit doubt, not so forthright, because you know I find it difficult to prove it. You know, we haven't got part of this, and we should be able to get correlations between outcomes and the dissymmetry on the plan. You know, and that is part of a later part of the project. But I think we've got to keep the focus on it. You know that I mean, Jan says we are making compromises at the minute because at the moment all the resource we can get is not spare resource is to do with this. I think the trust needs to not, you know, you ask the staff, lots of initiatives come out, which we have to do with upgrades to different systems, do this in a different way, change this, change that, which takes away from doing this. Now that might make us be able to produce better graphs, doing things a different way. Doing this properly will change the outcome for patients, which is, say, would be the priority. And I think, you know, in the next 3 or 4 years, we've got 2 radiotherapy centres to open, completely change the system. And if we do it properly, we'll get more efficiency, better outcomes. That's got to be our focus over anything else. I think that, you know, we're not doing well on waiting times at the minute because the systems are poor. We're trying to change that. We could take people off this to make the waiting time slightly better, but not much. And it is always that balance, isn't it? But I think it's that as a trust, well, certainly as a radiotherapy centre, we need to keep the focus on getting this right.
I think I would say in support of Tony with that, really, which was, that is what our ambition is. It is what transforming cancer services is about, and the IRS was an element about delivering that in different locations, with different kit and equipment, absolutely focused on the very best that we could achieve for patients. we're probably seeking your support to help us realise that. That's where we want to get. That's where that's where the retention, the recruitment, the benefits for patients, the benefits for staff that Tony touched on really are what we can see this will realise for us. And I suppose it's a little bit of understanding the tension that we're dealing with in that kind of capacity and waiting list challenge, which is whatever resource we move today to deal with today's is a little bit that we might have moved off the planning, and just understanding that we're dealing with that balance every day, but we're absolutely focused on the patient, the one we've got today and the one we want to get to in the future. And a bit of clarity around, for all of us, this really is our priority, and just a bit of understanding that this is our priority. And whilst there are lots of other performance metrics and reports and things that the board is naturally and rightly responsible for, helping us maintain our focus and priority would be really, really helpful.
That's great.
So, Kathy, I think that's very well said. And I wouldn't want you to think for 1 minute that the board hasn't been considering those things. I mean, for the first couple of years of my time here, we were concentrating on getting a new system procured, and that took up a huge amount of board time. As all the issues that Tony was outlining at the beginning, we've lived through that as well. We've shared your pain, and now we're moving to what should be a very exciting phase of the new kit coming in. But I want to reassure you that the board is fully sighted on the pressures that you're all under. We do have to receive the data which tells us about breaches and targets, and so we do have to receive that, and we do have to challenge that, because we would be doing our job as a board if we didn't. But we do absolutely understand the pressures that quite a small team really are under to get to continue to look after our existing patients at the highest possible standard and to get the new kit in. I want to assure you that we do get it. We absolutely do get it. So when you receive challenges from us, come and, we want to talk to you about it. Come and talk to us about it. And that will be the way that we get through this. I'm talking too much now, I realise. Carl, you wanted to say something?
Oh, just to thank the team. I mean, just to say,
I'll do that at the end.
Awesome.
Have you got a point to make?
Point. I wrote up here, just looking at some of the big dots. Tom talked about why we're doing it. World-class care. We talked about technology. We're starting to get integrated systems. Talked about value and data. So that allows us to do AI, machine learning, sort out the workforce challenge. So it's starting to come together as a piece. So I just think the board lift up a level and understand how this thing is starting to shape up. And just congratulations to the guys to get this far.
And Donna, I would want to reassure you, we understand that is the right and appropriate challenge for us as a team, but just to share with you, we recognise and acknowledge that.
So Carl, you could give me a row afterwards for cutting you off at the knees there. I'm just mindful of time. Nick?
I think you're probably going to cut me off the knees as well. I was just going to say, as the professional lead, the leadership the guys have given here has been tremendous in difficult circumstances. So, and the whole team, so well done.
Thank you, Nick. So I don't know if you're able to stay a little bit longer and meet us for lunch, but if you need to get back, that's fine. This has been really helpful, and I think we're looking forward to part 2. And we'll have that pretty soon.
Ongoing, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have that pretty soon. We won't leave that too long. But this has been really important because we've communicated and we understand really where you're coming from, what your pressures are. We see it through the data, but we've heard it through your voices today, which is really helpful for us as a board.
Thank you very much all for enabling us to come and share. Just so excited we are about it all.
Yeah, it's been an exciting, if bumpy, ride to get to the place where we are, but we will be delivering you, and then you will put it in place, the best fleet of Linux radiotherapy machines in Europe, we understand. Do you want to just wind up, Steve?
No, I mean, I had a few questions, but I could pick those up with you separately, and I just think it's just a huge opportunity, and just to show your team in particular, the body language change as the first one came in. They're really important steps, aren't they? Because they're working really, really hard. and the physics guys are not seeing it, and the impact. I just capture what you captured was this whole organisation change. This is, and that's big. That is really big, and we do get that. It might not feel like it sometimes in the conversation, but we do talk. We're here to support you as my team, working with the SLT and you as the SLT to succeed, which is all we all want.
So can I say, Tony, Helen, Kathy, Tom, thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. It's been really valuable for us. And perhaps early in the new year, Lauren, we could have the second half of the presentation, and you have our support, and we're grateful to you for keeping on till we get to the place we want to get to. You've got my briefing now.
Yeah.
Guys,
thanks a lot. Thank you.
That's kind of yeah.
Can I take us to back to the agenda proper, please, and we go back to 3.3. It's going to be hard now to kind of come back down to earth a little bit. That was so inspirational, but we need to come back down to business. This is the performance management framework, July 2023. Carl, you're going to introduce this item and take us through it.
Yeah.
So can I hand over to you, please, Carl?
Thanks, Chair. So if I just make a couple of opening remarks, and then I'll perhaps pass across to Rachel to comment on the cancer service performance, and Alan Blood, and then we go on to later papers, picking up workforce and also finance, which Sarah and Matt will pick up. Just the opening remarks, colleagues will have had a chance to read the paper up to July, but good news to report to the board that performance in terms of quality, safety, experience remains high. Also noting the financial position, which Matt will touch upon a little later, remains positive, i.e. within expected budget. Quite clearly, the report also identifies there are some areas for further improvement. So as an example, radiotherapy and stem cell collection, colleagues will pick up a little later. And again, just to re-emphasise the conversation we've had and will continue to have, as per every other NHS organisation, the challenges remain the same. So for example, we've heard today about increasing demand, which is a good thing in respect of some of the service we provide, so people get treated quicker. Workforce recruitment, retention and burnout. Financial situation, as Steve mentioned earlier, notwithstanding all that, actually driven by the end of the year. So that's just a broad position, but good at this point in the year. So I'm just going to pass across perhaps to Rachel first, to just pick up a couple of highlights from the cancer service performance. Then Alan, and perhaps you'll just take questions, Chair.
So just before we hand over to you, Rachel, the introductory paper was really very helpful to signpost us through what we need to look at. You know, we often, grumble about what isn't helpful to us. I found that extremely helpful because I just went straight away to look at the things that had got picked up in the introductory paper. So thanks, Carl and the team, for that. Rachel.
Thank you. So I suppose things to note for us, we've seen improvement in SACT, which is really great. We still have the fragility of the service in relation to our nursing and pharmacy workforce. However, from a nursing point of view, we are now part of the streamlining for nursing, which is the first time, and we have had a really positive response from individuals who have expressed Velindre as their first preference to come and work with us. So that's really positive. And we're also working with HEIW to look at some alternative opportunities for appointments. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to fill some of those vacancies and put some stability to the service going forward.
I can see you look on your face
It's going to be where we would not be able to bring new registrants in to deliver SACs. We have had excellent response, but we will plan to increase our nurse workforce, but they would not be able to initially because they wouldn't have a consolidated work placement post registration.
Which they need, which completes their training, in fact, doesn't it really, actually? Okay, right, thanks,
Okay.
Rachel.
So I suppose just to note our delayed transfers of care.
That's the one I was going to raise.
Yeah.
That's spiked.
It's something that we are aware that is a problem, but it's a national problem because majority are linked to us getting repatriations back to health boards, and they're having trouble discharging their own patients. So there's a national pathway of cares delay group, which we are actively part of.
So normally when we think of delayed transfers of care, we think of going from hospital to home or hospital to residential care, or that's what we normally think of. We don't normally think of delayed transfers of care going from one hospital to another, which is Velindre back to a health board.
Yeah, so for I think Nicola may have more detail on this, but they've looked at the definition and contributing to a regional database. So for us, normally the numbers are quite small, but whilst they do include the discharge back to social care, they actually do include discharge back out to repatriation to health boards as well.
So what I'd be interested in knowing is, so 9 delayed transfers of care. There's 9 in the period. I'm wondering how many there's any one time and what effect, if any, that's having on the capacity of the ward to taking new patients.
I think we've picked that up. I'm not sure if it's in this report, but we have been working with Carl's team to look at putting that additional line into the PMF, so be able to give you a bit more detail in the table, to look at when actually those periods of time are.
Nick?
Yeah, I think that the team have been involved in 6 schools work nationally, and I think through that work they've been realigning and just making sure the data definitions, etc., are correct. Repatriation is the biggest issue, given the challenges on health board beds.
Yeah.
And that is, the team have got an escalation process in place, but the availability of our patients once the Velindre treatment or care is being concluded to be repatriated back to their host health board is the challenge.
So are the amount of delayed discharges affecting our capacity in the wards, in our ward, to take in patients that require?
To be made aware of that as an issue.
So can I just ask a different question on this so I can understand it? So are we saying that it's gone from 1 to 8 because we've extended the definition to include patients moving from Velindre back into another NHS hospital? Or is it that the definitions remained unchanged? We just don't know times meant, because if you've changed the definition, it doesn't necessarily mean we'd have to recalculate everything going back, wouldn't we, to compare?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think we've been more purist in our definition and making sure that's correct. And I think there may have been a few previously that we weren't included and maybe in hindsight should have been. But I think the issues with repatriation have increased.
Thank you, Stephen. Gaz and then Andy.
Yeah, so what we've termed as delayed transfers of care is now being called pathways of care delays. And in that is a difference. And so it is about the picking up any pathway where care is delayed. This is a hot topic, certainly around nationally, medical directors table. We're actually going to have a session with the directors of social services to have conversations around how do we tackle this at a national level, because we never have those conversations, we've never met them, but this is what's needed to start breaking down some of those barriers. And
the NHS is having that conversation day in and day out, actually, and it is a very difficult issue.
It is a difficult issue. So I mean, when I say we, the medical directors, I suppose, haven't had the conversation, roundtable discussions, which we're starting to do. I think just looking at our data, so we had 8 cases, 5 of them were repatriation, 3 of them were trying to get home. So it is about the context of that, which the data reflects. And I suppose the longest time people were waiting was 8 days. One patient waited 8 days for getting home, and the other repatriation to a local hospital 8 days. So, I think we'll have to see what happens, but there is a potential this is not going to go away immediately. We've got to get smarter at, I guess, planning for it and understanding it better.
That helps.
Thanks,
a bit more
Jazz. Thank
information.
you. Andy?
I was also alarmed by this section more than any other. And I'm starting to understand a bit now, but it was, to me, it wasn't the absolute number of patients, it was the length of delays, you know, to 8 days. I was and I didn't understand when it says patient delayed discharge home for 3-5 days or whatever. To me, so well, don't they go home in a taxi? Do they need that? You know, but it's much more complicated than that, because this is about prepare wherever their destination is, whether that's home or another hospital and health board. It's about that, having that ready to receive them, isn't it? So that's but these to me, as I say, it was the number of days, and I say, how can a patient be waiting 8 days to be transferred?
Should go to the health boards where they're waiting months on end.
I know,
Months and months.
Yeah, but it does feel like a problem that, as you say, is going to be here to stay, I suspect, because of the problems within the wider system. Yeah.
Is and if when I meet with my chair peer group and we meet with the minister, always the top of the agenda is this issue. Always at the top of the agenda. So it's like Belinda's joined the club in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, the impact is now starting to affect us as well. I think
Yeah, it's bound to, isn't it? It's backlog. Yeah. So back to you.
I guess the only other thing to pick up, radiotherapy. So you've heard today some of the challenges linked to the service delivery and fragility of the workforce and the LINACs. But I suppose a positive note going forward is that we have seen benefits of the training that we've been doing around the data quality. We've also, in August, seen the full rollout of the care path system, and I suppose provide some assurance that we are seeing improvements in our performance data as we go into the August data set. So that's positive.
It's positive, and take our thanks to the, because that doesn't just happen by happenstance. It happens because of the way in which people work together to make it happen.
It does, and people like Tom and Helen, who were here earlier, have done a huge amount of work working with individuals, working with individual teams in terms of improving the understanding of the definitions that have been set through the new regulatory treatment time. And getting that system up and working, they've done a huge amount of work, so I'd like to thank them as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Before we go back to you, Carl, any other points on the Cancer Centre? Carl, please.
I just invite Alan to make a few sort of highlights on the blood service performance change.
Yeah, so July represents a fairly strong month for the service. Demand was met for blood supply, upper platelet supply, coupled with low wastage rates across the piece. So demand and supply seems in kilter. You will note that there was a report to the HTA, given that there was a culture growth, no risk for patients, that those processes were closed out. Thorough discussion took place in QSP, so we went through that discussion. Donor satisfaction, all our quality markers remain extremely high, extremely positive. Our areas where we've just got a couple of performance markers that are stuck would be reference serology, small department, but recruitment of staff and training of staff is ongoing. We're expecting to see some improvements on that. And the real thing we're putting a lot of heavy lifting into at the moment is our bone marrow recruitment. Just understanding what is the tactical recovery plan. Some of it is a bit long term. We're bringing in extra resources to the service. We're talking to specialist groups, stakeholders, ambassadors, reaching out to some ethnic communities, as well as reaching out to our educational platforms as well. There's something about how we recruit within blood sessions, and there's something about how we really up our game with swab recruitment as well.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to be bringing that type of recovery plan back to the board or through committee over the next couple of months as we bring that forward through.
And following our visit yesterday, I think Matt and I would like to be involved in some of those discussions. What we might suggest might be ludicrous to essential and crucial, or anything in between those 2 points. But I think we would like to just offer some observations that we gleaned from just talking to the service yesterday.
Yeah, great. And maybe it's something we can play into the board development session.
Yeah.
Before. So I think there's a timing issue for us that feels quite right in terms of realising some of the issues we're facing in this area and the sector.
Vicky.
Just a point really, because I enjoyed going to the award ceremony where we were recognising blood donors that was recently held, but I think swiftly followed by a news item on the BBC Wales, which I thought was very good timing and made it really high profile, which was fantastic. So
yeah, and
it's great for the team.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. And just in terms of the way I'm trying to present the service is to really raise the profile about the bone marrow registry. The event we were at was actually 6 stem cell donors who attended within the Aberystwyth district area, which is, I think, the highest number. So I don't know what they're feeding them up that way. But they all attended. All were happy to be ambassadors for the service, to promote the service. Great stories that will be fed back. We've had some really lovely comments back. We've been making sure those go on the wall of thanks in terms of some of those reviews as well. So subtly but surely promoting it. But there is some myth busting we need to do in here, and we need to time things right. So it feels like we're turning a bit of a tanker, but I think a tactical, more strategic approach to it is the right way.
Well, one of the things I was going to say, the next set awards are in Wrexham in October, which I'm going to, and I've spoken about these issues with the new chair of Betsy and asked him if he would like to come along to one of the evenings with a view to him going back to his own board, you know, to begin a process of dispelling some of the myths. So I hope that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think
you
raised that with us last time at USB, so, and I'll be in attendance of those.
Oh, will you? Great, that's excellent, excellent. Any other queries for Alan in relation to Welsh blood?
Okay, just some of the other indicators, and if I could say properly, if there are no questions, what I'd suggest is workforce and finance, but they're covered under the report 3.4, which Matt picks up, and 3.5. So I don't know if you just want to drop into those reports as part of the framework, but that's the report for up to July.
So you suggested we go to 3.4 and 3.5 next?
Yeah, the indicators are in there, but there's a bit more detail in the supporting reports, which colleagues usually speak to.
Right, so I'll come to that. And I just wanted to. Oh, you've got a query about the Welsh blood?
No, sorry, not about Welsh blood. Just saying, I'd rather do the performance around workforce because the absence target report is a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So we note the contents of the report and the detailed performance analysis, which was provided in it, the scorecards and the supporting data analysis templates, which are in appendices 1 to 3. The new style PMF performance reports are continuing to be developed by the PMF project group, the number of potential new measures currently under consideration. And if I can reiterate, the cover paper was very helpful, I found, in signposting the key issues that we needed to follow up and look specifically at the data. I found that very helpful indeed. So, Matt, if we could come to 3.40, which is the financial report, please.
Thanks, Chair. So, Stephen is chief executive report.
Have I not done?
I don't know, sorry, I misunderstood Sarah's question, I think, did I?
Sarah wanted to do the stuff.
Well, I thought you meant you wanted to do sickness absence and the
My mistake, Jai.
where's the new target proposal for a new target? Is that in that report as well?
No, Chair, that's what I
separate the two.
They're separate.
Do you want to separate the two?
Yes, please, because one is around current performance, the other is about proposals for a new target, so they're not covered off in the same paper.
Okay then, I am nothing flexible. So do you want to go next?
My misunderstanding.
Yeah, yes,
I misunderstood you as well.
Just a brief overview in terms of the KPIs around workforce well-being in the PMF, as opposed to the discussion around potential new internal target, which we'll cover off in the paper in a short time. So colleagues will see the data to July. So statutory mandatory training, we are over target, 88%, which is reflective really of the huge amount of effort that's been put in across the service. So just pay testament to that. PADR, we are sort of hovering around similar numbers really. That's fairly level, around 74%. But as we do talk about absence levels, and there's some points here really which then are pertinent to the current performance. So we are now seeing in the paper 5.71% to the year to July. The more up-to-date data I've got is we're now seeing 5.64% for the year to the 24th of September. So that's our most current data. I was trying to bring that along to the board if I can. So this is tracking in the right direction. We need to be careful of the language used in the PMF because I think it talks about downward trend. Downward trend is good when it comes to absence levels. That's what we want to see. So we need to be mindful of that when we're reading the PMF, I think. But just to add to that, really, and I know colleagues here are interested in short-term and long-term absence, and we're continuing to do work on this. So short-term absence is about where it usually is, which is quite low, really, for an organisation. But I'm glad to say that our long-term absence is now starting to track downwards, and that's what I think is giving us this overall downward trajectory, which is very good news because that's the absence that is I think the biggest impact in terms of service delivery, because clearly we need the number of cases of long-term absence to come down. That's what takes management time, that's what takes support. We are putting a lot of case management support in around those individuals. And that's what really contributes to stress within teams, isn't it, when we talk about people being on long-term absence more significantly. So I'm glad to say that that is tracking downwards. So I just wanted to make those points into this item, Chair, in terms of the minutes.
Thank you, Sarah. So is your hand up, Martin?
Yeah. Before we leave the paper generally, I want to ask questions on section 2.5, about patient donor experience. It mentions a couple of surveys we've done, and I can't recall having seen your Velindre experience. There's 91% against the target of 95%, which I think 91% is terrific, but we set a target, and so it would be helpful. I don't know if QSP has seen it or whether it hasn't come to the board. I can't recall if it's seen it.
Yeah. Looking staff survey, Martin.
Yes, the patient experience.
Yes, it is reported as part of the divisional reports into QSP. Okay. We get a significant level of detail in relation to both donor and patient experience.
So there is scrutiny of that. Okay, that's I don't want to do it here. Okay, thank you.
Martin, oh, if you don't, can you just say that again? I'm just caught up where you are in the paper and I just missed it. So
the paper, the satisfaction survey, which says your Velindre experience.
Yes.
I was asking, have we seen that? And Nicola said that yes, QSP has scrutinised that. So I'm content. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I really didn't. I was trying to find the place in the paper and listen at the same time, and I failed. So thank you, Martin, for that observation and query. Sarah, it's in your section of the report, you do set out the proposals for a new target.
No, sorry, it's a separate conversation, really, Chair. I was keen that we minuted within the performance item on the agenda, the performance conversation.
Under 3.5.
Yeah, we haven't got to 3.5.
Still on 3.3. I'm still on 3.3.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm so confused with okay, so this shouldn't be in there then, should it? Oh, not that one. This shouldn't be in there.
It should be. It should be. The brief is right. We just haven't got to it yet.
Matt, can we come to you with the 3.4 from the finance report, please?
Yeah. So as I said, Steve and Carl mentioned the All Wales financial landscape. You'll be aware that I've discussed before that the Chief Executive of NHS Wales is chairing an All Wales group called the Sustainability and Value Group, which is the key driver to try and get collective improvement in the financial position across Wales. So representation from chief execs, medical directors, finance directors, COOs, all of the key executives that sit around board tables. And there's a whole range of improvement proposals that sit within 5 areas. Medicines management is one, workforce. You see all those, but as a key group that will help drive improvements and good ideas and spread them consistently and mandate it in a way that obviously is Legal entities, we have to make the decisions, but it will be a fair bit of expectation from government across NHS Wales, any improvements. Just a context, and there's some of the stuff that we've done proposed is set out in the cover paper in one of the sections there. So coming on to the paper itself, this is the standard report you get in terms of our financial performance. The position is as at July, in month 4, and you may question, well, hang on, we're in September. Governance cycles unfortunately creates this gap, so I do have a month 5 position, but it hasn't been through all the various governance cycles. So I will highlight if there's anything different. There's nothing majorly different, but I will highlight for you one thing in terms of the capital. So table 2.1 gives you the 3 performance indicators, which are the ones we need to focus on in terms of finance. As has already been said by Carl and Steve, our forecast financial position remains on revenue, be on track to balance, and our public sector payment performance is also on track. And I know, Donna, you pointed out the trend had deteriorated slightly from previous years to last year because of the annual report, which we will present tomorrow. You can see, it's got back up to fairly good performance at 98%, so there's definitely been some improvement, and it's probably more to do with capacity and staff gaps being filled in shared services than anything. What I want to highlight is the capital one. So traditionally we have said that we will meet our capital target, and we will still meet that on all our major programs and our discretionary, so we will live within the capital limit we've been afforded. The point of flagging it red here in the last report is really around the new VCC project management funding. So just as a point, so that when we submit our report to Welsh Government, it's an important point to make that we are still pending that funding that they've promised us, but hasn't yet come formally. And also to point out that this report at month 4 is describing it, I think, as 1.7 million in the capital section, 1.8 million, sorry, and 2.8. That has been revised upwards based on our conversations with Welsh Government, because that was only up to the end of December. And obviously in terms of the extension to the project work that needs to be done, that needs to carry on to March. So they've asked us to submit a revised figure. So we'll be seeking a figure of 2.7 million funding, and they're cited on that. It just needs the formal process of funding. So section 2.2 includes within it what I've described, a proposal this board signed off in terms of how we're going to contribute to the All Wales financial position. So we haven't yet had formal response, but in terms of that, the expectation is in the next 3 to 4 weeks, Welsh Government will be responding to all the health boards and the NHS bodies in Wales based on what they submitted about what they were going to do to improve their positions. I think we will have a specific meeting, is the impression I got from Finance Director for NHS Wales. So we'll have a specific meeting with the Trust, with Welsh Government officials, to work through the 2 proposals plus any others that we might be working on, which we will obviously come back to the board if there are further ones that EMB, execs agree. Savings, so I think I reported through the various committee structures, but I'm not sure the board have formally had this in terms of savings. We had a number of schemes that were amber rated, which you will be familiar with, but we've reassessed those as being rated red, i.e. we will not deliver them this year. Those schemes have now been removed from our savings plan, replaced with other non-recurrent schemes. Clearly that creates a hole in our current financial plan, and you'll notice that in the report we describe how we have now reduced our carried forward surplus to reflect that, because essentially we're going to have to use that money to fill that recurrent hole in the plan. Reserves, we always hold an emergency reserve, and we have that set at about 500,000, which is there to enable us to meet any unforeseen risks that arise financially during the year. We haven't committed anything against that as yet. And then the overall financial risk at 2.7, just to flag again a timing thing. We've got the 1.5 million risk there around the issues we talked about earlier around our new DACR system and making sure is that working correctly in terms of capturing all our activity. Pleased to say that based on the August report and discussions with the service and all the work they've done to improve that process, that risk is down to 500,000. And actually, from conversations this month in September, it's reducing further. So my anticipation is there will not be a risk. And as you know, we've only pulled out that one risk here. In the detail report, you get the full suite of financial risks and opportunities, which we're always balancing off of those risks anyway. Capital, just to say, as well as the request of Welsh Government officially for the 2.7 million additional funding for the new PCC project, we have officially declared we will be handing back capital funding in relation to the IRS project that we've just heard about, and that is because of the slippage in the programme on the new cancer hospital. There's had implications in terms of timings of some of the things that they're going to be implementing that they talked about. So it's not we're losing that money, it's being taken out of the plan for this financial year and re-provided next year or in future years. And the same with the satellite centre, because there was a whole amount of capital we were going to spend right at the end of March in readiness for the new satellite. And again, minor slippage in that programme has pushed that capital to next year. So we've officially set that out to Welsh Government. And I won't say any more. I think that covers off the key points, and I'll take any questions.
So already answered a number of the queries I would have raised. That's so thank you for that. Looking around the table, Martin, anything?
Clear as always. Thank you,
yeah, very clear. So and this doesn't happen just by coincidence and happenstance. People have worked hard to get to the positions you've outlined in this paper.
Down to the budget holders, both in capital and revenue, and it's the whole stuff you just heard about IRS as a program and the immense work that goes on there, that all filters through, isn't it, for the expenditure and the monitoring of that, which is done by my team with them.
So just want to acknowledge that that people have worked hard to get to that position. I have to admit, the beginning of the year, I thought never make that savings target, and you're on track. So I'm just astonished and very pleased to notice that. So we note the content of the July 2023 financial report with some indication of the August position, as you've set out that, and in particular the year-end financial performance, which at this stage is reporting a break-even position. Now, if I'd followed the agenda as set out, I would have now come to that. Everybody got me confused. I didn't know where I was. So the next item on the agenda is the sickness absence key performance indicator with a proposal from Sarah.
So colleagues will be aware we've had numbers of conversations in committee and at board previously around the efficacy of the 3.54% absence target. So we know that Welsh Government at some point will or may review that. But what we decided through conversation here previously is that we would set for ourselves a more realistic target based on some kind of evidence that we could pursue internally, notwithstanding the fact we still have to report against Welsh Government target as a tier 1 target. So what colleagues can see in the paper, and I don't propose to go through it in detail, is that through benchmarking across the labour market within NHS Wales and then across other organisations which we may say are similar in part to ours, we are proposing that we adopt an internal stretch target of 4.7% to be reviewed again 1 year from now. And this has been subject to lots of discussion, of course, at EMB and at QSP, where it's been endorsed for broad approval today.
EMB have endorsed it.
Yes, and then went to QSP, similarly endorsed, Chair, where I understand I wasn't there, but Sue led the discussion on the paper. So I'm very happy to answer any questions, have conversation, but I don't propose to go through any more detail. Colleagues would have read the paper.
I'm going to open it then straight up to questions for Sarah. Stephen?
Yes, well, it's not so much a question, but a big thank you. Say we discussed the detail in QSP, and as you say, over several years, I think we've raised this entire issue of the historical anomaly of, as just as a reminder, at the time we were on, I think it was 4.54%, Welsh Government took a view that they wanted, I wonder if someone misunderstood the ask and they took that 1 percentage point off everybody instead of, perhaps they meant 1%, but it actually meant 22% reduction in our target, which of course was never going to be achievable or reasonable. So I'm very pleased to welcome this here, so we discuss the detail. The only one little picky thing I'm going to pick up on, which we did touch on this before the meeting, is the confusion between percentage points and percentages. And I know you've gone through and taken some out, but you've obviously, someone's left one in there just pick up on. I know John and others, Martin and others would have picked up on the same. So in section 3, under the very helpful chart there, it mentions a 0.66% decline in role in absence. Percentage point, because it's actually nearer something like 9%.
Yeah.
So you're actually underselling our achievement there. I mean, not trying to be pedantic here, these are public documents. It's actually underselling the decline. It was percentage point.
Happy to do a seminar if anybody's interested in the difference between percentage difference and percentage point difference. I did it once to a group of Portuguese students and they seem to get it. So
I do get it, Chair.
Sorry for being condescending, Sarah.
We tend to write, isn't it, which is not necessarily said correctly.
But you know, most of NHS Wales reports percentage differences and actually they mean percentage point difference. Martin.
Thanks. I think this is long overdue. We've argued this for a while about having impossible targets. It's still a stretch target, as I think you said, because the current stats is 6.3 or 5.7, I think you just said for the previous. Do we think 4.7 is achievable? Obviously not this year, but we're almost talking about returning to pre-COVID levels, and therefore, comparing that table, the table that's in section, on page 4 of the document, gives some really stark numbers about how the NHS Wales is performing. In some places, 10% of the staff are not available at any time, which is a big concern. So for us, if we're 4.7, sounds like we've set it at a level which is achievable, we think.
So just, yeah, that's a really good point, Martin. So what we've done is been very careful before writing the paper and actually thinking about what that number should be. Had lots of very detailed discussions with the Healthy Engaged Steering Group, which I did reference earlier, where a range of colleagues from across the organisation, across different services actually had that conversation around, well, does this feel achievable actually? And all of the elements at play here, we talked again about this in the risk discussion earlier, didn't we? This is a very complex picture, so many factors which contribute to our absence levels. So we are confident that we've consulted across the service, Martin, and this is something we feel that at that a year from now, we could achieve. And that's why that's our proposal.
The other, there might be nothing in this because I understand the data, but just qualify with that. But just looking at the seeming difference between frontline service delivery organisations and support service organisations, it just seems that there's a number of percentage point differences, Chair, in those sickness absence rates. So just looking at that table there, it'd be interesting to understand that a bit better because it's probably a little bit more complex.
It's not surprising.
No, it's not, but I think, nonetheless, it's sort of stark in that table, isn't it,
But it helps you target what you want to do, doesn't it?
But then, yeah, as you said, because then for those who are frontline organisations, really it's between 4-6% up to 10%. So that's the sort of range. And if you move those almost sort of outliers in a different type of industry, so
yeah, and if I may, and we've always historically sat within that basket of support organisations, even though we are a frontline service. So what we're trying to do now is it is about pre and post COVID, but I think there are many other factors at play. It just happens that tends to be the break point, isn't it, that we can see in the.
Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if you mentioned this, Sarah, but to what extent have we discussed this revised target with Welsh Government? And do they agree our approach? And maybe provocatively then ask, what's to prevent us from adopting other targets for ones that we're maybe not achieving in other areas?
So, first of all, we're not adopting this as the Welsh Government target, and that's a really important point to make. So from now on, we would see two numbers, if you like, in terms of our target. One is which is reported nationally, the other is our internal measurable stretch target, as we said. I have had conversations with Helen Arthur, Workforce Director in Welsh Government, around the fact that this is something we want to do, and she's really supportive of that, but saying that that's not something that would be reported through their mechanisms. So there's...
So you will report to Welsh Government on Welsh Government targets?
3.54%, absolutely, because that continues to be our nationally set Tier 1 target.
Have you got any idea when the national piece of work might conclude?
Well, you say conclude, but I had the first conversation with Welsh Government at the end of last calendar year, and since then things have been a bit subsumed in industrial action and so on. So actually that work hasn't actually happened, which is why I think we had the discussion here. I think we've been waiting for that to some extent, but that's not happening anytime soon, Chair, so my only reflection on that. So that's why I'm keen that we have a different kind of conversation internally then. I mean, obviously, the journey to 4.7 also is the journey to 3.54%.
Yeah.
So that notwithstanding, we're still moving to a positive direction.
I can't see any other hands up. We haven't undertaken this lightly. We've taken this deliberately and after a lot of thought and appropriate consultation. So we're asked to approve that this is an internal sickness target, and to make the point that we will still be submitting performance data against the national target, and that we understand that this is a stepping stone towards achieving the Welsh Government targets, and we await the piece of work that's going to come out of Welsh Government in due course, which will affect all organisations in Wales when that's concluded. Is everybody content with that as an outcome? Thank you, Sarah. I remember when the ambulance waiting times targets were changed, and people just said you can't make the target, so you've dropped the target. And it wasn't that. It was because I remember Siobhan McKellen at the time, and it was what's the most appropriate target for the service and so on. So there may be some fallout from it, but I think that we've got a very good we got a very good case that we can make as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So coming out to 3.6 and then 3.7, we've got the QSP Public Safety Quality Performance Committee highlight report. Over to you, Vicky.
Okay, just take the paper as read, but I will just raise the one issue that was an alert and escalation to the board, which is that we were unable to endorse or approve several trust policies, and there were quite a few on the list, weren't there, in QSP, because they had not completed the equality impact assessment. So the committee took a strong view of that and will continue to do so, and we just need to gain assurance as a committee that that process is robust. That was taken back by execs. And I think just two other points from the advice section. The fuller inquiry action plan, we received the report. There was the higher level of percentage of actions had been completed, but we noted that the level of assurance was given as 6, which would mean that all actions were complete, although they hadn't been monitored in terms of sustained. But we said that couldn't be correct. Therefore, that was going to be adjusted. And Nick outlined in the meeting that further training is going to be done to facilitate the levels of assurance in papers to be coming across consistently, because we noted they were inconsistent across the papers in QSP. And the comments that I've made about the trust assurance framework you'll find in the summary as well.
Thank you very much, Vicky. That's really helpful. Could I urge exec colleagues, please, that when papers, policy papers in particular, but all papers come in, when you sign them off as the exec lead, can you check, please, that the quality impact assessment where relevant has been undertaken, because we have been pointing this out for some time, and those policies are going to have to come back, aren't they? With that, and you know that just takes up more committee time than is warranted, really. Because if that assessment had been completed, they would have been signed off. Can I just urge that, please, Matt?
You need to have a process where they're all Wales policies, because one of the ones I think was flagged, which is why I was confused, related to something they'd gone through an all Wales process. And clearly, we were told and given assurance that the quality impact had been assessed, yet it wasn't clicked correctly. So we need to check that. We need a process of checking that the all Wales processes delivered that, because you wouldn't want to do individual. Well, maybe you should do individual ones. I don't know, but if it's an all Wales policy, it should be an all Wales assessment.
But it becomes a Velindre policy once we approve it. So the point still sort of applies. Sarah and then Nick. Sarah, please. Sarah, you were first up, so just going to you first.
No, there's two things for me here. And apologies, I wasn't in QSB to have the conversation there. One is around a formal QIA process, which obviously policies do need to be subject to. All Wales policies have that done nationally, but I agree, we need to just make sure we pull that through in our internal processes. The other is the template for the cover paper for reports and so on, which I've advised and encouraged people to write a little bit more, don't want to use the word intelligently on there, because people just put not applicable.
They do.
Rather, because it doesn't have to go through a fully QIA process, but actually there are always diversity, equality implications of work we do. I say always, very often there are, and therefore that could be reflected in more nuanced comments within that part of the template.
I agree.
That's what I encourage people to do, even if it's not a policy which is subject to a fully QIA or a major decision which is subject to it.
And there could just be an occasion where it's not applicable because it's been through the national, but in the context of Velindre,
we need to reflect that in the comments.
Yeah, in the comments, there may be equality impact issues. Nick?
Yeah, picking up on Matt's point, when we went back and checked one of those, actually a national equality impact assessment documents taken. So we have raised that nationally because that is really important. So we are doing a local equality impact assessment now in the absence of a national one, and we would have raised it with the NHS executive.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Nick, for that information. Any other points? Yeah, sorry, Steve.
So I just want to come back on then on Sarah's comment about the default N/A, and you've obviously endeavoured to try and get that addressed. But I just wonder, as a board, then, one option is for us to not allow an N/A without an explanation as to why it's an N/A.
Well, I think that's what we did in QSB, actually. Yeah. By default, that's what we did. Vicky's chairmanship.
Maybe what we need to do is just communicate with people, write the papers again, just to reinforce, really. And I'm really happy, my team are really happy to advise on what that might look like. Colleagues are struggling a little bit.
I think the paper has a drop-down template in it, so it might be that we just need to readjust that. So
we'll have to. Yeah. Okay, that's a helpful suggestion, Alan. Thank you. I can't see any other hands up, so we got an action. As well as discussing a note, we've got an action out of that in relation to quality impact assessment. So 3.7 is the Public Audit Committee highlight report for the 26th of July. Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I realise I'm standing between us and lunch, so I'll try and be swift about this, particularly as this audit committee refers to 26th of July. The meeting was largely around signing off of the annual accounts, and you will recall the last board meeting was the 27th of July when we did exactly that. So on the list of highlights themselves, all the escalate sections were all dealt with at board on the 27th of July. Just to point out under the advice section, the frustrating way that Audit Wales have delivered the audit the last year. The audit plan was received. What they will do as part of the audit the same day as we received the outcome of the audit, which was clearly not the way it should work. And we've expressed those concerns to Audit Wales. There's another note here about trust assurance framework. I said we didn't coordinate our responses, but yeah, it's obviously the same kind of issues, and everything there is just for information, really. So happy to take any questions.
Any queries for Martin? Thank you. It's very detailed report, very helpful. In his and the QSP report was also very detailed and helpful. They really getting populated in such a way that they're very informative now. I mean, they tended to not be so well populated, but they are now, and I'm finding that very helpful. So thanks both for that. We have done item 4.1, which takes us to section 5. We haven't got anything in the planning and strategic development. So we come to section 6, which is consent. We've got 4 items for approval and 8 items to note. For approval, we've got the Health and Safety Management Annual Report. I haven't been told that anybody wants to take items out of consent for discussion, but if you do, now is the time to let us know that. No hands up. So we approve the Health and Safety Management Annual Report. The Quality Impact Assessment Tool, which Nick has provided, we're asked to approve the use of the national beta version of the Quality Impact Assessment Tool for all strategic decisions at divisional, executive and board level, and to request hosted bodies to also adopt the tool. I presume, Nick, that you were taking the lead on ensuring that they tooled up for that. I used the word tool as Alan used the word buzz earlier then, but you know what I mean. So thanks, Nick, for that. And then the lease for approval, Mail Order Limited was approved. So under consent for noting, we've got the Strategic Development Committee highlight report, the Welsh Health Specialised Services Committee briefing, Emergency Ambulance Services Joint Committee EASC briefing, Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, and the Shared Services Partnership Audit Committee Assurance Report. Approved policies update. We're noting the policies that have been approved during the period of June to September, and the affixing of the trust seal approval report that we're noting. Then 6.28, the WIBS annual report, Wales Infected Blood Support Scheme annual report, comes from Shared Services, but the board is chaired by yourself, Lauren, isn't it, for that? So that concludes item 6. I haven't approved any other business, which is item 7. So the date of the next meeting is the 30th of November. Just before I close the meeting, I want to give you one opportunity, colleagues around the table and our virtual colleagues. Are there any issues you want to raise into any item that we've discussed, which perhaps you didn't have a chance to make at the time, or you've thought about it since, and there are important matters you just want to raise at this point before I close the meeting? Alan.
One observation on the WIBS annual report, and it may be it says about the inquiry, the final report will be published in autumn 23. I believe that has now moved to spring 24.
Was probably correct at the time of
it was changed.
It may have been.
The news only came out this week.
I didn't know if it was important or not, but I thought it was.
We could note that in a minute.
It's a really good point. We could, I mean, this hasn't yet been published, so it's been approved through the Shared Service Partnership Committee, and then here, before it goes on the website, we can publish that, so it's not confusing for the public.
Yeah, that's helpful. So that's really helpful. Good spot, Alan. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Vicky.
Just to make a comment, and I had shared these prior to the meeting, but the Trust Environmental Policy, there were a number of issues, sort of quality assurance before it came to the board in terms of the paper, but also the governance route in terms of waste management policy from what was on here wasn't clear. So, because it says that the waste management policy had gone to, or had not been to QSP for endorsement, but it had been elsewhere. So I think it was just perhaps to make some comment on that.
Carl, because very helpfully you sent that out before the meeting, Vicky. So Carl, do you want to respond to that, please?
Highlight that, but yeah, so there's a couple of things, there's a couple of typos you corrected. So that policy actually went through Strategic Development Committee on the 6th of September after going through EMB. And just in terms of EQIA, the only change to both of those policies, because they're related environmental policy, and then within that is the waste management policy. There's a change to the plastics bill, just a single change, because it's got no material impact. And we've checked that out with colleagues in Sarah's department. Does it require refreshed EQIA, and professional advice was no, it doesn't, because no material change. So hopefully, if that closes the loop, and we've already corrected the typo. Thank you for noting that as well. So if the board's happy with that,
The only other thing was a policy statement, because that was attached to the environmental policy. Because it was, and I was apologising because I must have missed it in 22 when we originally approved it. So it says Velindre University NHS Trust HQ is a division of within Velindre University NHS Trust.
Corporate function, always yes, that's a, so I'll
Didn't
correct
make sense.
that. It doesn't make sense, because that's correct. So if I correct that as well, the board are happy for me to do that. I agree with Vicky's point. Just make it right, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you content with that, Vicky?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next meeting is the 30th of November at 10 a.m. So I'm now asking the Trust Board to adopt the following resolution: that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest in accordance with Section 1(2) Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, paragraph 67. Are we content so to adopt? Thank you, colleagues. That concludes this meeting.